Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this special meeting of Finance and Corporate Services Committee, where we are dealing with the first part of our 2024 budget. We're dealing with the operating budget. So as everyone's aware, there's been some pretty, I would say, significant changes in how we deal with the budget process as passed down by the province of Ontario. I just wanted to, usually I make some comments. I'm going to actually save my comments on the overall budget for final budget day, but just in terms of process, I wanted to be clear that today, in the past, the way things would work, if councillors had any significant questions, they could ask for an issue paper, which would come back on final budget day. That won't be happening for this budget, just to do the changes in the compressed timeline and how that's been handed down by the province. But what you can do is, if you have any interests that aren't covered in the staff proposed budget, you can certainly raise them today as questions, and I would encourage you to follow up with staff afterwards in private meetings, et cetera, and bring them forward as amendments by the deadline as outlined in the budget calendar, okay? Does anyone have any questions on that? I'm not seeing any. The only other thing I would say throughout today, even though there aren't really any votes occurring, the way this process works is we really are giving it back our feedback for the mayor to propose a similar alternative budget. So I'd really encourage members of committee today to try and be clear and provide that input back to the mayor, and especially with respect to that the $2 million worth of options that are outlined in this budget, where we have $1 million of available spending room. So I think that would be very helpful to the mayor. And as I understand, Mayor Rabinovich, you'd like to make some comments.
Yes, very briefly.
Oh, hang on a second there. I can't seem to click you in. Oh, hang on one second. We're just switching to committee.
It's the way some people like it. Thanks, Chair Davey, and thanks for your opening remarks. And I will just open up by saying I think we're all finding our way through this new process that the province has put upon us in terms of how municipal budgets are to work going forward. I think as we talked about previously, and as you and I have chatted, certainly I think as much as we can, the hope is to continue to work in the collaborative approach that we have in terms of completing our budgets. I think one of our strengths as a council in the city is the fact that our city staff and our partner agencies that we hear from, including the library and the centre and the square, have historically taken a very prudent and responsible approach in terms of the budgets that they have presented before us. And I think the presentation that we're going to see today continues that tradition. And to be frank, a lot of the heavy lifting has been done by them, and I just want to begin the day by actually acknowledging that and thanking them for that work. I think it's fair to say, and I know members around this horseshoe have privately commented to me. We're starting at a position, and we have a draft budget before us that is something that is in line with what I know many of us committed to in the previous election, as well as what we've committed to as a council in terms of keeping things at or below the rate of inflation in terms of affordability for our residents, and that to me is very important as well. So as has been noted, if folks have input and ideas, certainly want to hear those. And I will say that my preference has been the way our budget processes have worked in the past, but it is what it is, and we will work through it together. And at the end, I'm hopeful and confident that in the collaborative spirit that's existed, we will come up with something that we can all be pleased with and proud of when we finish the budget on December 14th on behalf of the residents and businesses of our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, Mr. Hague, or Mr. Lautenbach. Morning.
On? There we go. Good morning, Chair Davey and members of the committee. I'm pleased to provide you with a general overview of the 2024 draft budget today. And as we kick off another budget year, I do want to first just acknowledge the great work of staff in terms of putting the budget together, both Mr. Hagee, also Ms. Andrade, and the budget team, but also all of the staff across the organization that have input into the budget process. All of the information is available on the city's website now in terms of the budget at kitchener.ca/budget. And there's a great budget summary report that residents can take a look at, which provides a great summary of some of the key elements that are included in the budget and also key elements for what's included for 2024. As already been indicated, there are some changes to the process this year, and that's as a result of change to legislation that took place back in July, where 26 municipalities were provided with strong mayor powers by the province. That's also been extended out to other municipalities since that time. And the main element of that, which wasn't really highlighted at the time, is that it does propose that the mayor is to propose a budget if it comes forward on or before February 1st of the year that it relates to. So you see in the calendar on December 4th, the mayor's intending to propose what the final budget would look like based on, obviously this draft budget. And then there would be an opportunity for council members to provide amendments, if any, as part of that process. But essentially, once that budget is proposed, it starts a clock, and that clock has a defined time frame associated with it. Once that time frame is completed, the budget becomes automatically adopted. And so that's a bit of the change that we're kind of navigating through this year. Certainly what we're intending to do today and also next Monday is really to have the same kind of content, though, that we've had in previous years, where we'll be going through similar presentation material, have an opportunity for council members to ask questions, provide feedback, and certainly for the public as well. We have a public input night scheduled on November 27th, where the public can provide that input, as well as other engage opportunities online for residents if they're interested in providing that feedback. So today, the focus will be on the operating budget and also user fees, but I do want to point out that through my general overview presentation, we will be touching on a bit of both operating and capital. Certainly as the boards come and present their information, they'll be also touching on both of those elements as well. And as we talk about strategic items, we will also have a bit of a blend of operating and capital, so I think that's important to just highlight for today. On the 27th, we will be focusing on the capital budget, the 10-year capital forecast and some of the details of that, and then also focusing on reserve and reserve funds. So when we think about the 2024 budget, you can really summarize it under three key priority areas. The first being supporting city services, and those are the services that we provide to residents each and every day. It's really the focus of that is on the operating budget and how we deliver those services. The budget also has a focus on infrastructure. Council, you're aware that back in the fall, we came forward with a report to update the water infrastructure program and the rates associated with that, which predominantly helped to fund our underground capital infrastructure and our full road reconstructions. But we also know there's many other capital needs, and so you see in the budget document and in the narrative, highlighting some of those needs, some of those challenges, and certainly also a focus on growth-related elements. As we grow as a community, making sure that we have that new infrastructure that we need to support residents as well. And then the budget also highlights a number of priorities to help advance our actions included in our new strategic plan that Council approved, the 2023 to 2026 strategic plan that included a new 20-year vision for Kitchener and a number of goal areas that are important to make progress on. And we're pleased that we've been able to incorporate in this year's budget funding that helps to advance those things and really hit the ground running in terms of just approving that plan and now seeing meaningful action in the budget to help facilitate that. When we're putting the budget together, some of the things that obviously we look at are the economic considerations. What is the current climate that we're in? How does that then impact the operating budget and other elements of the budget? And certainly inflation has been a talking point, not only last year, but again, still this year. It was at all-time highs back in 2022 when it was around 8% at one point. It has come down, but what we do see is that inflation this year has really been hovering around that 4% range. And when we look at where inflation is in terms of a 2-year average that we have used in the past few years to determine whether the property tax increase that we're proposing is reasonable, that 2-year average would be 5.3%. Now, I'm pleased that this year we've been able to come in lower than that because I think it's important consideration to also balance what our property tax rate increase might be with what would be a reasonable increase for residents. And so we are proposing a 3.9% property tax rate increase this year, which is well below that 5.3 2-year average, and also below inflation, which has been hovering around that 4% range. Now, certainly, I think we all agree and hope that inflation continues to come down, and the Bank of Canada has been increasing interest rates over the past many months to try to achieve that. Based on their latest forecast, just even in October, though, they have indicated they expect inflation will stay higher for longer. Between January and June of 2024, they expect it will be in that 3.5% range. So as much as they're hopeful that it would be coming down quicker than it is, certainly, their latest projections indicate that this is still something that will be a little bit higher than what we're used to, and something that we're going to have to deal with, and as we look at our budgets as well, that we set not only this year, but as we go into 2025. So how does inflation impact the city's budget? Well, it's really on the operating budget side and supporting city services. We deliver 50 core services for residents of Kitchener each and every day. And when you think about 13% of our budget is materials, you have contract services, which make up a portion of it as well. You have funding that we're providing to boards and grants that we need to index that are reflective of inflationary increases. And then on the capital side, we have contributions from the operating budget to help fund our capital program. We have seen significant capital cost escalations over the past couple of years. And in this year's budget, we've actually doubled what we normally would put towards the capital program from the operating budget. We've included additional funding for facilities as well. And I think that's a reflection of what we're trying to address in terms of those inflationary challenges. But when you do think about all of the services that the city provides, the fact that we've been able to propose a 3.9% increase while still maintaining existing service levels, while we still have a community that's growing, I think, speaks to, the great work of staff and also just the process that we have in place and great decisions that have been made by council to put us in a strong financial position to be able to provide that type of increase, which I believe is reasonable for all the services that we do provide, providing a lot of value for the residents of Kitchener. Another area within the budget is a focus on infrastructure. And as we think about the assets that we own, they total $9.2 billion. Our capital forecast in terms of total spending over 10 years is about $1.8 billion. And so it's important that we are putting funding towards the replacement of our infrastructure as it ages. Certainly we have been proactive where we can to address some of our infrastructure challenges. Certainly our water infrastructure program has been helpful, which was launched back in 2017. And, we made progress in terms of addressing our underground infrastructure needs, plus our full road reconstruction projects, which are a significant portion of our capital budget, and renewing sort of what we need for rates over the next 4 years. So we are proposing a 6.3% utility rate increase this year and for the next 4 years that predominantly will help with some of those capital challenges, addressing some of the capital escalation that we've seen, and certainly making progress in important critical infrastructure areas. We've also put more money towards facilities, and back in 2019, coming out of the long-term financial plan, we put additional funding towards that asset category. You'll see additional money within 2024 for some critical facility needs. But we're also making smart investments in terms of using our energy retrofit reserve, and when we are replacing components in buildings, we're not just doing like for like, but we're making sure that those decisions are made so that we are moving towards a low carbon future. And so that's something that you'll see is that certainly utilizing that reserve where we need to help make that transition. And then we've also secured significant grant funding through proactive measures over the past many years, about $150 million over the last 3 years. Some of the examples of that is Disaster Mitigation Adaptation Fund, the $50 million that we received for the stormwater utility, certainly $17 million for the new aquatic center that was provincial and federal funding that is included over the past 3 years. And the most recent announcement, the Housing Accelerator Fund, where we're receiving $42 million from the federal government to support housing needs, which we know are important for the community. And so, certainly we take advantage of those opportunities where we can, particularly to help on the capital side. But I think it's important that we also acknowledge that advocacy efforts need to continue, both in terms of asking for more funding to help with our infrastructure challenges, both from the provincial and federal government. When we think about infrastructure, it's not only what we own, but it's also thinking about new infrastructure as we grow as a community, making sure that we have what we need to support that level of growth. And within the budget, typically the framework that's been used to pay for those new capital costs has been development charges. And in the last 2 years, there's been changes to legislation that have impacted the ability of municipalities to have the same amount of funding that can be put towards those needs. So Bill 23, which was introduced by the province, certainly has had an impact in terms of some of the funding that we are seeing coming in terms of changes to the Development Charges Act. And that could mean that we might need to look further out in the forecast at some point, either delaying the timing of new infrastructure in future years, understanding what those impacts are, and making some tough decisions. I think it's worth noting that for the first time, the city will be issuing significant development charge debt to help fund growth-related projects that are currently in the 10-year capital forecast. So part of that is as a result of obviously the capital cost escalation that we've seen, but it's also part of the lower cash flow that they're receiving now because of changes as a result of Bill 23. So with that said, we are certainly hopeful that the province still makes good on their promise to make municipalities whole. Certainly think that's important as it relates to growth-related infrastructure in our communities. Really exciting piece of this year's budget is the fact that we have aligned a number of things within the budget to help with, moving forward with priorities that were identified within the 2023 to 2026 strategic plan. We've been able to incorporate about $5.5 million in investments that are already included in the budget to help, enable that and move that forward. There's certainly more details that are in the budget package about those investments. And we've also been able to keep $1 million in one-time funding available to and unallocated for council to provide some feedback on in terms of how you may want to see that allocated against and further advance strategic priorities that are identified within the budget package. When we look at some of the things that have been built in, and this is a summary that's also in the budget summary report, we see under the 5 goal areas the investments that are being made. We know that when we went out and did extensive engagement on the strategic plan, housing was one of those #1 priorities, and you see, under the first goal area, building a connected city together, we're fully utilizing the $1.2 million from our Affordable Housing Reserve to help with the implementation of our Housing for All strategy and in support of our Housing Accelerator Fund application and the $42 million that we're receiving from the federal government. Certainly I think that's a reflection of the fact that Kitchener is certainly doing its part in terms of trying to address the housing crisis and the needs in Kitchener. Another example, under creating an economically thriving city together, you'll see the feedback that we've received through previous budget processes, and also strategic plan. We have funding to launch additional special events, including 1 major festival in Kitchener in 2024. So, as we hear feedback, as the community provides feedback, that obviously sets our strategic direction. And then you see that there's budget funds that are put towards launching those initiatives. And pleased that we've been able to fit in what we have been in this year's budget. And then again, under fostering a caring city together, under that category, you see that we continue to provide options to reduce financial barriers for recreational programming for youth, new Canadian seniors, and those with low income. Affordability is always something that we want to look at and make sure that although we might need to increase user rates, we might need to increase property taxes, we have programs that also help assist those that might need it so that they can still participate in the programs that we offer as a municipality. So when we think about what it all means in terms of everything that's included in this year's budget, the overall impact as a result of a 3.9% property tax increase is about $47 for the average household. When you look at 6.3% for the water utility increase, that's about a $77 impact for the average household. And I think it's important to note on that one is that about $27 of that is really pass-through costs from the region. So when you reduce that off of the $77, really in terms of the costs that we can control as a municipality, the total impact, both property tax and water increase combined, is less than $100 in terms of the impact for the average household. And I think when you think about everything that we offer as a municipality, what we've been able to continue to make progress on, the things that we have in the budget that we know are important to advance our strategic plan, I think that provides tremendous value for the residents of Kitchener. And you see that, I think, as well in terms of this graph that we always include within our budget package. This is a comparison of both property taxes and utility increases that compare major municipalities across Ontario. The yellow bar in the middle is the average, and then you see the darker green, which is a little hard to see on the screen, but we're always on the lower end of this comparison. You know, certainly we've held a consistent position on this graph, and well below also our regional counterparts in Cambridge and Waterloo as well. And when we specifically look at property taxes in particular, this graph shows a cumulative tax rate comparison between the other major cities in the region and the region itself. And you see that Kitchener, over the past 5 years, our property tax rate increases have averaged 2.4%. That's well below Ontario's CPI inflation, which has been at 3%, certainly below the other cities, and well below the region, which has been at around the 4% average. Certainly, as we update this in 2024, and although we don't know where the other cities are at, but we know the region is contemplating a significant increase, we expect that we will be in a similar position. And I think what it speaks to is the fact that we always try to find that right balance between what we need to support city services and at the same time being reasonable in terms of what that means for overall burden to taxpayers. And certainly I think we're continuing that trend with what we're proposing in 2024. So to summarize, this year's budget is really about those three themes: supporting city services and the ongoing daily services that we provide to the community. We're pleased that we've been able to come in with a property tax increase proposed at 3.9%, which is well below that 2-year average and below inflation that's been hovering around that 4% range. It also focuses on infrastructure, making sure that we're taking care of what we have, also being mindful of what we need for the future in terms of new infrastructure as well. And then finally, advancing strategic priorities, being able to build into the budget $5.5 million in investments to help hit the ground running with implementing our new strategic plan, and that $1 million that's also available to provide some flexibility for council to provide feedback through the process and further advance those strategic priorities. So with that, Chair David, I'll turn it back to you if there are any questions before we move on in the presentation on the other material.
Thank you very much for that overview. There are 2 people in the queue, beginning with Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll quickly start off. I think comments were rightly made by the Chair and Mayor Brvenowicz of, I think, the tremendous effort that a budget takes place, but more importantly, having a draft budget that's something that I think is a great starting point, where it recognizes the efforts for austerity, because people on the street are feeling a crunch, while at the same time recognizing that we have to grow as a city and we have to improve the quality of life of our citizens as well, and that we are implementing those strategic changes. So on that, I think we shouldn't be too humble. We should recognize the great starting point and the good work that staff have done. So we have a 3.9 starting point, but we have $5.5 million built into strategic priorities. So that's 5.5 built into base budget, correct, already?
So through the chair, the 5.5 is a mix between funding from
Capital,
reserves,
yeah.
capital, and there is a bit of operating within that as well. So it's not all just ongoing built into the budget in terms of operating dollars.
What portion of that would be operating?
I believe the total is around 2 million in terms of what the operating piece is, and then other reserves have been used for some other initiatives as well as capital.
Of course. And so the reason why I'm trying to pinpoint and recognize that point is, although our starting point is 3.9, and I think it's the right suggested rate increase because it's well below the rate of inflation at this point, and it's in keeping of what the commitment that this council has made in past budgets as well. And at the same time, it's lower than, I think, amongst all our peers or many communities across Ontario. But technically, if you didn't want to, improve the quality of life of a citizen and said, hey, we just want to have a reduced budget as much as possible, we could essentially had that 2 million out of that, and our starting point could have been 1.9, essentially. Correct?
So through the chair, it's correct. I mean, if we didn't have those investments, that could be an option. I think, with council endorsing the new strategic plan, it's important that we're making progress on those priorities. And I think that's why the budget reflects that. We know that we need to make investments not only just for today in the short term, but we need to make investments that impact the community in the long term. And that's really why the new strategic plan had that 20-year vision with goal areas to try to make progress. And so I think, when we look at previous budgets and certainly these budgets as well, or this budget that's in front of you, we've always tried to have, those types of things that are built into the budget because we think it's important. But certainly to your point, if that wasn't in there, that certainly could have been an option in terms of coming in lower, although, again, you have to weigh what is those short-term needs versus the long-term in terms of what we're trying to achieve as a community.
And Mr. Chair, the reason why I raised that point, and I think Mr. Lautenbach has excellently articulated that exact point. Far too often, just on blank, a resident may say, hey, look, I'm dealing with huge increases in my cost of living, and why is the city increasing rates? It should be zero. Yes, we could have brought our budget. We are so well positioned as a community that we could have brought our budget very close to, again, what everyone's wish list could be. But the fact of the matter is, our budget is well below the rate of inflation in the keeping of all our commitments, and we're significantly broadening on our strategic priorities. And that's why I just wanted that repetition over and over and over again. I think it can't be said more than enough. Quickly, on the cycling, 700,000, 7.6 overall. Is that 700,000 capital and operating, or some of that? And is that built into the base budget, so which would be that continued 700,000 in future budgets as well? That's built into the base.
So through the chair, that's capital funding in terms of this kind of phase 3 of the implementation of the downtown cycling grid that was planned. So that is capital money. And then I think the reference to the 7.6 is capital funding over the course of the 10-year capital forecast.
So the 700,000 would be built into over the 10 years? Or it's just for the 2024?
It's for 2024 in terms of the amount that we're putting towards it.
And traffic calming is the same way?
The amount for 2024, yes. And then, if there's a reference to further, I'm not on that slide, but if there's a reference, that would be the full 10-year forecast.
But just quickly on the DC debt, that's staggering to see that amount being added, especially when we've done so well in paying off our debt. That could reduce based on more clarity from the province as to what that funding rebalancing would be?
Through the chair, certainly it could. I think what we are trying to do right now is project what actually we need in terms of total debt funding. Now, I think the key thing to note, and we'll touch on this in the capital presentation next week, but it is fully recovered from future DCs. So as much as we are issuing DC debt, it's not increasing property taxes, which I think is a key thing to highlight. It does create some challenges on financial flexibility, though, and so that's why it's never great to see the significant debt that we need to take on. At the same time, if the province does provide more funding, that would certainly alleviate some of the pressures that we're facing, specifically related to Bill 23.
And that's what I was trying to get clarity on, is the ongoing graph, seeing that increase, is presumption that we don't get any clarity and we have to meet our infrastructure commitments, correct?
I think it's correct to say that it's related to kind of the 10-year capital program. I think what it doesn't address is beyond that window, right? As we open up our DC study again, under the new framework, if there wasn't other funding coming, then there's other priorities that we identify further out that we'd still have challenges to address. So, I think it is the realization that just to fund what we need to and we plan to, that's what we actually have to do. Certainly, we're hoping for clarity from the province in terms of what they hope to provide in terms of making municipalities whole, and that would certainly help.
Thank you very much. If I can quickly just say, all this for someone who's been in office for 12 years almost now, and others longer, if for us it sounds confusing, I can only imagine for anyone else. So the best effort that we can do is start to clarify and summarize so that it can be better understood by citizens. That would be helpful as well. Thank you. 14? No. 13. Oh, wow. All right.
Thank you. Councillor Owoduni?
Thank you very much, Chair. I mean, just looking at these numbers, thank you very much, Jonathan, for the presentation. Doing my numbers, 3.9% tax increase, probably about roughly $11 a month altogether. But, I mean, which is great, and I love, you know, what we have here that says we're one of the city of Kitchener has one of the lowest tax municipal burdens of large cities across Ontario. I do also want to point out, as you know, in the conversations we had, several members of the community who are either on a fixed income or struggling at this point, and I would just love your thoughts. I know it's something that we've spoken about, but I think it would be great for us to just share. How can we support those individuals, you know, as we have these conversations? I know, yes, it's $11 extra a month, roughly, but for someone who has hit a fixed income at some point, that could be a struggle for them. But we'd love your thoughts on that, please.
Yeah, so through the chair, and just to clarify on the impact, so the $47 for the property tax impact would be about $3.92 per month in terms of the total impact. But certainly in terms of seniors, those that, maybe, you hear comments about being on a fixed income or those kind of things, there are programs already in place that can help with that, particularly related to property tax. There's a property tax deferral program that seniors can take advantage of and apply to, and their information is on the city's website about that. There's also a grant through the province in terms of property home ownership grant for seniors as well that they can access that provides, I believe, $500 as a grant related to property taxes. So, there are programs already available that help with those that might be struggling with some of these types of increases. Certainly I think what we proposed is a reasonable amount. Certainly, as you mentioned, it's lower than other municipalities across Ontario, and I think it speaks to our process and the fact that we do, really factor in affordability and what that means and take that seriously when we're setting a budget. There's other programs as referenced in the budget as well. We look at user fees and rec programs, where we do have access to those programs by providing subsidies to allow people to participate. And so, I do think we've done that in terms of having those programs, and I think that's where I would direct people if you're hearing kind of those comments. But certainly I think what we propose is very reasonable in terms of taking care of what we need to, in terms of as a municipality our size, at the same time having that right balance in terms of that affordability lens.
Thanks. And my next question, in line with what Councillor Singh had mentioned, our wish list. So I'm sure you probably had some ideas, and all the other leaders had ideas of some of the things that we would like to do, but because of our commitment to citizens, we do the best that we can to lower it. Do we have any idea of what some of those things are, so people have an idea of some of the things that we are holding ourselves back from as a city because of the limited increase that has been proposed?
So through the chair, I wouldn't say that anything that's proposed in the 2024 budget that we've limited in terms of what our needs are. Certainly, on the operating side, we always go through a process where we look at our budgets in detail. We make sure that we're setting targets internally and we're hitting those targets in terms of what we need. We're also taking into consideration the growth-related items that we need as part of that as well. If there was one area where we know that it's something that not only Kitchener but all municipalities are struggling with is on the capital side, where we do need more funding to help support our infrastructure replacement. I don't think it's something that we can property tax our way out of. I don't think it's something that we can raise user rates to unsustainable levels to get out of that. And so to my comments earlier, I do think it is continued advocacy with the province and with the federal government to have different tools that municipalities have to help support some of those needs. And so when I think about progress, when I think about the budget, it's that incremental progress. Are we every year kind of putting money towards an issue and seeing progress in it. And I would say that that is the case in the 2024 budget and something that we always look to every year. So nothing else besides that really comes to mind.
Thank you, Chair. I have one more question. I have 30 seconds. Can I squeeze it through?
Please.
Thank you. Infrastructure. Most of the times, people don't tend to focus on that area. Can you give us an example of some of the things below the line that people don't see but are really crucial and important in terms of the services we provide as a city?
Yes, for sure. So through the chair, as mentioned, we have $9.2 billion of assets that we're responsible for in terms of not only the replacement but the maintenance of. As you think about all the underground infrastructure, the water pipes, the sanitary sewer lines, our stormwater utility in terms of how water, flows across the city when it rains, when we have extreme weather events, all of those things are easy for people to take for granted and not think about until all of a sudden, the city's flooding, as an example. When you think about the roads that we need to maintain to a certain standard, as somebody drives their car and they hit a pothole, right? Like these are all of the examples of the assets across the city that we're responsible for not only replacing to make sure they remain in a state of good repair, but also maintenance activities that are needed to extend the life of those. Certainly our facilities, as we offer community programming in our rec centers, in our parks and our trails, all of those things are what we refer to as infrastructure that we need to take care of and we need to maintain. So it's a significant amount, and I think it's easy to lose sight of that. When you think about an increase or in our budget, it's a significant part of what we do each and every day to both maintain that and to make sure we're replacing it in a responsible way.
Thank you. I just wanted residents to be aware of some of those things because there are times when we can easily forget that aspect of it. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jonathan.
Certainly. Councillor Michaud.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan, for the report. It's a remarkable budget that you've done and the staff have done. I have one question with regards to, and this won't surprise you, traffic calming versus cycling infrastructure. There's quite a discrepancy in the amount of dollars being put there. And when I get calls, and I don't know if I can speak for all of council, but when I get calls, I don't hear any asks about more cycling trails or better cycling infrastructure. What I'm hearing is the amount of speed and bad drivers across the city, particularly for me in Ward 4. So I'm wondering if you could balance this off a little bit, if it's possible to put a little more to traffic calming.
So through the chair, I think the reference, obviously, to the cycling network, is phase 3 of what has already approved by council and planned, and that's the $700,000 that you see in the strategic investments. I think over the past couple of years and couple of budgets, we've talked about traffic calming quite extensively. I know we've put more dollars to that initiative. So I think that's something where, staff have indicated that to the level that we have right now, certainly, we've had those increases. We've put more budget to it in the past, and what's included in the budget reflects what we think our needs are in terms of that type of program. Certainly, as we get into the discussion later today, if that's a follow-up question that you might have that Mr. Reedman would like to answer and respond to, certainly can be happy to do that. But I do think it just reflects the fact that we've put significant money there previously to that program. And the extension of our cycling network is work that we had planned to do and we're continuing to move on with.
Okay, thank you. I look to more conversation later. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Chair Davey, and my apologies for not being here today, but you'll also thank me for not being here today. I just wanted to thank Mr. Lautenbach and team for working so hard on this budget and for the nobody wants to have a 3.9% budget increase, but in the times that we're in, I think it's pretty remarkable that you and your team have been able to keep it at this level. And as Councillor Singh was saying previously, other municipalities would love to be looking at a budget increase only of this. So I just wanted to express my gratitude and thanks again. I'm not saying that I love a 3.9% tax increase, but given what we're looking at economically right now, it really is pretty remarkable that you've done this. So kudos to you and your team. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair Davey. Yeah, I echo a lot of the comments with regards to the budget. Nothing but always phenomenal work by our staff. Also have the same concerns as Councillor Michaud with regards to traffic calming and the cycling as well. I know we may have approved the cycling, but what I'm hearing from the community as a whole is we've gone way too far. And where we're lacking is in trails. So I would love to see us pull back a little bit on that. But anyways, what I didn't see in here is our leaf collection program, because one of the things that I've been hearing a lot in the last month is from many of my residents that I represent. Why is my street not part of the leaf pickup program? And I have no real good answer to give to them other than it's not a fair system for the entire city. So can we elaborate a little bit further on that?
So through the chair, the leaf collection program is administered through our water infrastructure program, which council already saw, sort of the rates that were proposed for both 2024 and beyond. Perhaps as we get to talking about WIP later, maybe Ms. McGoldrick could comment on that program in the context of the 6.3% increase, if that works for timing.
That's fine with me. I think we need to have that discussion because literally I got bombarded over the last month and I really didn't have much to say to them. So, and I don't blame them when they have their street next door right beside them saying they get leaf pickup and I don't. So that's concerning to me. I guess the last thing that I wanted to talk about, where in the operating in here when we see lighting in parks?
Sorry, lighting?
Yeah.
To add lights to parks?
Well, I know several parks do have lights, but we shut them down. And I'm just curious why we're shutting them down when we're trying to encourage kids to play and everything else. And so I'm wondering where is that line item in here with how we...
So through the chair, perhaps we could take that away, and as we get into the presentation material later, we can provide a follow-up answer on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. If we could we just go back one slide for a moment?
Trying.
And I just wanted to, first I wanted to thank Councillor O'Dooney for his question, how we started, and I think it's a question that I hope gets asked at every budget meeting in every municipality at all times, and that is, how can we help those that are at least able to afford it? And the question sometimes gets, for people that have been councillors for a while like myself, it's kind of built into how we operate, but the answer really is on this chart, and I wish it actually went back to 2010 or something like that, because the delta at the end of this chart would be even wider. So it's a fair question to ask, and we represent it here. I think it's also important to point out that the tax target that we've adopted is the balance over 2 years of inflation, and the reason we have that, there's two reasons. The main reason is, in my mind, is to hold us accountable that we shouldn't be spending significantly more money than we are forced to spend via inflation. And the reason we do it over 2 years is because it shaves off the peaks and the valleys in terms of how it hits our residents. So that's the fact that we're coming in 1.4% underneath that 2-year target is really the answer to that question in my mind. I think it's an important one that we need to be reminded of. If I could, Mr. Lautenbach, do you know, in terms of the region's budget, will they be finished their budget before or after ours?
So to the chair, I believe it's December 13th is their final budget day. I could be wrong on that, but it is December that I believe they're planning to be done their process. Maybe perhaps, I don't know if the mayor has more clarity. There's a nod there, so I think that's correct.
Yes, okay. So I was just wondering, one of the questions I get asked a lot too is they'll hear a percentage from us, they'll hear a percentage from the region, and there's a lot of confusion in terms of what it actually means for their property taxes. So I know the final budget document hasn't been prepared yet, but it might be useful to have a slide clearly showing, because we're around 30% of the total tax bill, showing what, I know our tax increase is 3.9% proposed, but that means something like 1-something% on someone's total tax bill. It might be useful to have that if the information is solidified, so people know exactly, because there is going to be a big increase this year, as we can see from the region, and the region has their reasons for that, but I think it's really important that we be clear so that when people call with questions why their taxes are going up so much, it goes to the right people. So is it possible to perhaps have that slide broken down in terms of what the actual total increase is per, and obviously the school board needs to be in there as well because they're the other 20% or 15%.
So through the chair, we certainly can probably provide that. I know, just based on preliminary numbers in terms of what we're proposing in the region, that it's about a 1.2% increase just for the city portion. I know the region at 8.3, I think it's around 4.7 in terms of what it would look like for an increase on the tax bill side. So the school boards, over the past many years, have not had an increase. And so we don't know yet whether they will or not. I think that's the one unknown. But it's safe to say if the region stays at 8.3, which I think is where they're at right now, they will probably represent about 80% of the increase that anyone would see on a property tax bill this year.
That's helpful. Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any other questions, so I think we're moving on to the boards.
Good morning.
Morning, Ms. Chabot.
Thank you for having me. This will be my 9th year presenting to council, and I'm delighted to say it's also my 9th year of staying within the city guidelines. So I would like to thank everyone, certainly around this council, and certainly city staff, my own team, for allowing this to be a possibility. It is not without innovation. We have done so much in the last 9 to 10 years in terms of innovation, but it's been through this partnership and really great work with everyone to find ways to innovate and to grow this community and to provide services and programs that are meaningful to everyone who uses our public libraries. So thank you for that. A couple of things that I wanted to point out, I think, in terms of this year's budget, we spent a lot of time as staff looking at staff compensation this year and did a very thorough review of where we were with the library compensation, starting with looking at new job descriptions and making sure that everyone was consistent within those job descriptions, and also hiring an outside consultant to really take a look at a market survey and where Kitchener Public Library stood and stands within comparators. So we had 12 comparators across the industry as well as the City of Kitchener, primarily public libraries of our equal size, slightly larger, but throughout Southern Ontario. And through that work, we looked at really 4 elements. We looked at internal equity, we looked at pay equity, we considered market equity, and we looked at sustainability in terms of the budget. The good news is we were absolutely fine in terms of internal equity. We're fine with pay equity. I think that we've been able to develop a sustainable option for salaries. Where we really had to spend a lot of time looking was at our market equity. And this has shifted, certainly since COVID. We noticed a big change in compensation throughout our comparators. And Kitchener Public Library had fallen behind a little bit, particularly in some of our bands. Kitchener Public Library has a pretty traditional compensation philosophy. We have 11 different bands, and within those bands we have 7 steps for pay parity as you go through those 7 steps for merit. Most of our comparators do a 5-step or have a 5-step program, so we really wanted to look at that. And when we really did the comparison, we discovered that out of our 11, about 5 of those bands needed some sort of correction. So with that, you will notice in the budget that we had flatlined or have flatlined some of the other operating costs that where we could, including resources for 2024, in order to make an adjustment for some of these compensation bands to bring them more in line on a competitive level for market equity. So the other part of this, I guess, philosophy is that we really wanted to see Kitchener Public Library at the 55th percentile in terms of compensation. And with our proposed budget, we were able to do that over the course of 2024. So there's no impact to the budget. We are still well within our guidelines, but I did want to point that out in case you looked at the budget and thought, well, you know, why isn't the resource budget, for instance, increased by some amount? And that's why. I'm almost out of time, but I did also want to say that we've, of course, been working on our fines-free experience, and in 2020, this council approved, in partnership, the idea of Kitchener Public Library going fines-free, and my commitment to council and to our city and our community was that Kitchener Public Library would try and find a way to make up that delta. We were able to do that through venue rentals, a new way to rent our spaces for special events, weddings, receptions, ceremonies that would happen primarily after hours. So we are not taking away from public access to our spaces. We did this after hours. And I'm so delighted to be able to tell you that this has been a resounding success. The community has really responded to our spaces. These are all right now at Central. When we open Southwest, we'll have another space I think that we can also use as part of that venue. But these are all at Central. And they have allowed us to make up most of the delta. And that doesn't include the staffing for this. We used, we staffed through attrition, so it still was a sort of a net zero opportunity for us. But we've been able to make up that delta so far, and we're looking forward to 24 and 25. It's going to be only going more and more successful as we promote our spaces. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There are quite a number of people in the queue to speak. I just would encourage members of the committee that we do have Mr. Carley, the chair of the Center and the Square Board. He's more on a time-limited basis, so if we could keep if it's more comments, we could keep those brief for now, I'd appreciate it. But I would also point out that while Ms. Shepherd was here, if you had any questions with regard to, I think it's in the back in the issue papers, F4, with respect to the piloting of some library materials in the community centers, this would be the appropriate time to ask those questions as well. First is Councillor Michaud. Thank you, appreciate it. Councillor O'Dooney.
Oh, now you caught me off guard. You said F4, and I'm looking at F4. Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation. I enjoy going to the library. I always enjoy taking my kids there and giving them an opportunity to come in. I wanted to just get your thoughts around just, it's a question that I've been thinking through. What would you, have you had a chance, or has the library done surveys consistently of, the clients or customers that come in, and what are some of the needs that they're interested in? What are they looking for? And is there a way that we can break that down so we can understand needs of, let's say, international students that come in, or needs of newcomers that come in? Just interested in getting a better understanding of what those are and how can we better support some of those things as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, yes, we conduct surveys all the time. We are, in fact, just through a fairly extensive round of surveys for preparation for a new strategic plan, which is coming up. We do offer focus groups. We talk to people all the time. We try to really identify programs and services that are most meaningful to that part of our community. You mentioned international students. That's a great example. So our Pioneer Park library location is very close to Conestoga College, as an example of heavy usage by students. There's lots of conversation about how we can extend hours during exams, as an example for that, so that students can use our space in a different way. They obviously have college space as well, but lots of students love to use that particular library. So, and we haven't been able to completely do that carte blanche yet, but we are very, very aware that students use us right to the very last minute of the day, and try to accommodate them as much as possible. But we don't have extended hours at this point to accommodate students. In terms of other programs and services, you know, we have a very broad community. I think that we try to serve everybody within the community, whether they're newcomers, whether they're students, whether they're seniors, and of course our very most marginalized and compromised citizens of our city. We try to provide service and space for everyone. And I think that what we hear more and more, and it's pretty consistent across the board, is it's a place to gather. It's a place where everyone is welcome, where one does not need to buy anything. And I think that is what we see. We have really seen since COVID, when we, of course, we had a dip in attendance. Our attendance has gone past where we were before COVID. If you come to any of our libraries, say at 4 o'clock in the afternoon through the evening, you'll be amazed how busy they are. That's become that community space.
Thank you. Councillor Singh?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mary, for the phenomenal work that you're doing. Honestly, your inward approach to manage your organization is exceptional, and I think that should be something that we, other boards and us, even the city, should look at to amplify and emulate the same thing. I'm very appreciative of including the pilot project. I'm so proud that, you know, I was able to bring this out, highlight the better usage of our community centers and in partnership with the library. The only thing I want to ask is, and I'm sorry if it maybe come across as a comment, but maybe you can provide some additional clarification. The essence of this was to provide the library resources in our community centers. I would hope that the bulk of the monies here don't go towards the infrastructure, you know, building up, you know, the carpentry for the kiosk, and rather, you know, work with the community center just to make those either books or instruments available that can be easily signed out. Perhaps you can clarify.
Sure, through the chair. This is the issue paper is primarily for that infrastructure, but that does not include the sort of the time of staff that are already committed to visiting community centers and to being really integrated with that work. So this is more infrastructure for the issue paper, absolutely, but that other work has already started. We already visit those come to the community centers. We already partner with programming there, so we are there already.
Yeah, no, and I believe that. And so again, that's why it's coming more as a comment that, and I have full confidence that the approach will be looked that way. See if you can limit the cost necessarily required for the infrastructure, and let's be nimble and maybe creative. This budget is appropriately fine. I would love to see that budgeted amount going towards as a return to the residents in those neighborhoods, as opposed to, of course, seeing the visibility of how that kiosk looks like. But I'll leave it in your capable hands.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Duneau?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mary. I'm not going to lie, I was not a big library fan when I was a youth, but since I've had children of my own, I think our especially the main library downtown with all the offshoots, phenomenal. You know, you can rent skates and instruments, and you have the 3D machines down there. You can rent, actual LPs. And so I think we should be the envy of a lot of libraries across the province of what our services are that we offer to our community. I just have a few questions. So I see in the budget of 2024, the other revenue is about 85,000 down from projected last year. Is there a reason for that?
Oh, thanks.
Thank you.
Other revenue. 85, so there was a little bit of a reason for that. We inherited a collection of recording equipment from the working center. It's called Common Studio. And there was a projection for the Common Studio rentals that for whatever reason, and we're still looking at it, we think it was partly COVID, partly it's working on marketing and making sure people realize that collection has moved to the library and is owned and now managed by the library. So that is primarily what you're seeing there, is a slight dip in that rental of the recording equipment.
Okay, well, thank you. And that that makes sense. And I think maybe marketing might be, a little underfunded of letting the community know that that's there. My last question is, and I'm thankful that as of the suggestion of Councillor Singh, expanding some of our library collections to our community centers. I'm not going to lie, I'm a bit disappointed that Kingsdale is not on there, as that area, does have a lower threshold of incomes, and also more people relying on public transit. So, the closest library would be on Blockline at St. Mary's, which is, it's close enough, but still, for a family with no car or having to use public transportation, it's a bit of an ask to go out there. And so I would. Obviously, nothing is finalized yet, but I would love to see Kingsdale at least somewhat put into this pilot program, as I know that there is many youth that utilize our community center, and I think, I'm sure all community centers would benefit from this. I'm advocating for Kingsdale because that is my ward, but also, I'd be inclined to maybe do a 1-year pilot program. I think, do it 1 year, see where we are at that point in time, and then we can expand it if it is successful at the two or three community centers. And so that would be my suggestion, is to just do a 1-year pilot program. Sorry, Michael, Mr. May. Mr. May.
So through you, Mr. Chair, I'd be interested in Ms. Chevreau's response to that. What I would say is that may be a waste of money to put the infrastructure in place and review it after only a year. My suggestion would be to run the 2-year pilot, but we're happy to work with KPL and community center staff to provide an email update after the year point to council in advance of the next budget. So if you decided to do something differently, you could do it then.
Okay.
Yeah, I think through the chair, that would be, I think a one-year pilot is too short. I think you would need more data to really be able to support that.
Okay. And no bookmobile, eh? We're not bringing that back?
Through the chair.
Maybe?
There is a line item for a potential bookmobile in the future.
Okay.
So
all right.
It is going to come back, and it's going to be really cool. It's going to be completely tricked out. I have this vision for this bookmobile. It is like the Flintstone style. So just bear with us.
Awesome.
You might see it yet.
Thank you, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Davey. Thank you, Mary, for coming in. We had a great talk with Councillor O'Dooney before this morning's meeting. He was just wondering, do you receive and collect any compliments, thank yous that show the impact of all the great work that you're doing? Because I think, and you and I have had this discussion, you do so much, but I think in your humility, we don't share all the good and the impact that the library has made in the communities that they serve.
Well, I'll introduce my team here. Angela Riddell, of course, is well known to council and to the senior team. Also with Angela today and with me today is Carrie Hutchinson, and Carrie is our manager of marketing communications. Carrie has a large virtual file, I'm sure, that we can share in many ways. In fact, we do. I know Carrie is excellent at sharing that through social media and other means, but we definitely get a lot of excellent response and compliments from our communities, for the work that we're doing.
I speak for myself, but I would assume the rest of the council would love to hear those good news stories of the investments that we've made on the library and how they're providing such value. So I don't know if that's part of your annual report or, maybe even somewhere on the website. Don't be afraid to show the impact that you're making through all the good work and programs that you're offering. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Michaud.
Thank you. I don't have any questions. I just want to thank Mary for your leadership. As far as the library it goes, you have enhanced every single corner of that library since you started, and the leadership that you've provided to the team that serves the library and the citizens, it's amazing. And this issue paper, bringing the library to the people, is huge. It's such a phenomenal thing to be able to be a child and go into a library wherever it is, even in a community center, and just experience all the books and all the wonderful things that it happens. So, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Rabinovich.
Thank you very much, and to Councillor Deneau, the chuckle about the bookmobile was because that is something that I've been passionate about in the past. In fact, it's how I ended up on the library board back around 1995 or 6 when they got rid of the bookmobiles at the time because of budget realities, and switched more to a branch model. But Mary, I too just want to thank you for your leadership over the last number of years, and for the budgets, as you say, you brought in within the city mandate. But when we think about how the library has changed, I think it is pretty amazing. I mean, references have been made to instrument booking, skates, internet that you can borrow, the Hefner Studio. It's just really been tremendous to see how the library's evolved, how it's a community gathering place now. It's gone from shh to hey, let's party it up, and when there's concerts in there, whoever, you think back to the days, and I know that was that happened previous to your time, but even having a coffee shop in there, we were lucky in my days as a kid to be able to drink water from the water fountain. So it really has come a long way. And I guess I do have one quick question for you. I noted that the library has been doing some work with community partners in the immigration space in terms of gathering people together. And one of the things that we're talking about is, and is in the budget, is work around a newcomer strategy. Is that a place where you see that potentially the city and the library could partner together?
Through the chair, absolutely. We work very closely with newcomer community leaders and the community itself, and I think it's a great place for us to partner even more. Yeah, happy
wonderful.
to do that.
Thank you, and the team for all your great work.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Singh, briefly.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief as possible. Just because Councillor Deneau did raise this question, I do support this should be broadened to as many community centers as possible. I think we just have to have that data and see exactly the way it's done. But I do want to say is we shouldn't place the pressure of that 1 year. It may be difficult. Speaking to a neighborhood where one of these kiosk libraries will be in, it's a transient neighborhood. It's a neighborhood with varying different languages and the limits of comprehension and speaking of English. It will take a while for people to know it's there and the full utilization that place can really provide. More than anything, what I would love to see maybe a year from now is not, okay, maybe it's not working, but rather how can we enhance it further within the pilot year remaining? And more importantly, perhaps it shouldn't just be books alone, but the broad range of things that can be signed out from the community center. Who knows, maybe even a 3D printer in one of these community centers. That's something exciting, perhaps, that we can consider a year into the pilot. I was going to say something. Maybe it's not important. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Chevreau. I appreciate your many years of efforts in making the library not only a better place, but doing it within the budget that's been provided, holding hold ourselves to the same accountability, and what you've done has been amazing. I just wanted to comment on the pilot. I'm certainly supportive of running this as a pilot and seeing what the outcomes are, but I do actually believe it's appropriate as a pilot. Noting that, at $136,000 for two, we're probably approaching, if we were to expand it to all community centers or other facilities that would be appropriate that are outside that we own, any pools, etc. This is something that could be approaching $1 million in expenditures just by doing the quick math. So we need to be very careful and compare the benefit of that versus the other things that close to $1 million can do. So I just think it's important we're prudent in how we approach this. But again, thank you very much for your work. No further questions.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have the Centre in the Square board. We have members of the Centre in the Square in attendance as well. We have Mr. Carley appearing virtually. There he is. Oh, apologies, Madam Clerk. Do we need to break for 2 minutes or for the, sorry, Councillor Johnson's having some issues. Okay, we will continue and we will take the break after we deal with the Centre in the Square. Mr. Carley, are you kicking things off?
Yep, that's great. Thank you, Chair Davey. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for seeing us today on a busy budget day. First of all, I'd like to thank Council for the continued support of the Centre in the Square. It's an important city asset that is essential to the arts and culture of the community, and we've survived the pandemic, and we are coming out of the pandemic in 2023, which we've had what I would say is a pretty good year so far. So we're pleased about that our patrons are coming back to the Centre in the Square for a lot of our regular shows. So that's been good for us. First of all, and secondly, our 2024 budget was prepared before the unfortunate bankruptcy of the KW Symphony. So those are the numbers we're looking at today. We've increased the operating grant as per the city guidelines by 3.4% to just over $2.084 million. With the symphony no longer with us, we are working hard. Our programming department is working hard to fill the vacancies in the 2024 calendar. It takes probably 6 to 12 months to get everything filled, but we're working hard to fill any of those dates that have now been freed up. We're trying to get as many different events in there as we can. And I think, as most of you are aware, we are right in the middle of a search for a new executive director, and we hope to have that finished at the latest mid-2024, but I'm hoping by late February or early March of 2024. Have the next slide, please. Yep. So as you can see from the slide, we had budgeted to break even, and we are expecting Breathe the Symphony. We were expecting a larger surplus, but we will still have a small surplus in 2023, which, as you all are aware, goes towards our capital at the Centre in the Square. In 2024, we're looking at a increase in shows, better use of the lounge, and perhaps more sponsorship. So we are projecting a surplus of about just over $150,000 for the year. And that was based on a pre-symphony. So we're hoping we can still hit that goal. We're not sure that we can, but we are working hard to basically get as many shows as we can to hit that goal for sure. That's generally our budget. I'll take any questions now.
Thank you, Mr. Carley. I'd also point out we have Mr. Henning and Ms. Cook here as well, who've been Yes, I would, being a member of the board, I would say have been navigating the ship expertly through waters that haven't always been calm. So questions of committee. Councillor Singh.
Yeah, and thank you for that analogy of navigating the ship, and it seems to be heading into definitely more calmer and more pleasant waters with the expected surplus in 2023 as well as projected for 2024. Remind me, again, maybe our staff can clarify, in the past it used to be a 50-50 split based on any surpluses. We may have had that change. Remind me again.
Through the chair, the wording that council has approved is deficits are split 50-50, surpluses are retained by Centre in the Square.
Retained by, and so that's what I thought. With the retained surplus goes towards capital.
Correct.
With their capital deficits.
Yep.
Okay, allowing them to meet that. Good. The other question I have, Dan, and in my past, I've had the opportunity to sit on the board. I've increasingly pushed for increase in other revenue, right, where we can potentially offset the requirement from tax supportive funding to the center. I do see in the other revenue from where it was budgeted and projected, and expected budget for 2024 is even less than 2023 budget. Can you tell me that trend and what perhaps the center can do differently to better utilization of that space outside of the normal, performances, similar to the earlier board presentation from the library, of what they're able to do, and why is it being budgeted less in 2024?
Yeah, absolutely. Through you, Mr. Chair, a number of things that we've done and we've started to look at is Joe and Sylvia have divided up the center into a number of responsibility centers, so each director is responsible for their set of revenue and trying to create a surplus from that revenue. Two areas that we identified that could use some significant improvement in 2024 is the lounge. I think most of you are aware there's a lounge in the basement that you can go down and enjoy a drink and some light snacks before a show or during intermission. We feel there's a tremendous opportunity to grow that revenue, and we've started to put a plan together to enhance that revenue through sponsorship and membership in the lounge, as well as increased sales and potential use of the lounge, outside of just theater dates. Last year in June, I think we had a wedding there, and there's other opportunities that we can look at, and we're definitely exploring those. The second area I see us we're trying to develop additional funds is through sponsorship. I believe we have a strong community that really believes in the Centre of the Square, and I think there's a number of businesses that could be approached to increase their funding or sponsorship or new sponsorship to the Centre of the Square, either through advertising or looking after, say, the programming, or displaying products. Like one example is perhaps one of the luxury car dealerships would like to place a vehicle in our front lobby for X number of days per year, et cetera, et cetera. So we're looking at all those different ways to increase our sponsorship. I really believe that's an important thing that we need to do in the future to help with our revenues.
Good. And my comment isn't a rebuke as to why it's being budgeted less, more so really a sense of expectation, which I hope is expressed by other members of council as well, that we really would like to see a greater utilization of that center, and where in the future, because the demand may increase with the capital deficits that do exist in improving that space, that those capital deficits can come from that sponsorship and other revenue increase. The last question I have is on marketing. I know it's kind of staying consistent. And I received one of those pamphlets that outlines all the upcoming shows. Seems to be an expensive venture of printing and distributing amongst the Kitchener households or within the region. What are we doing to broaden the patronage outside the region? How are we marketing outside the region? And is there a different strategy being considered for the marketing?
We haven't spent we are definitely continue to develop our social media marketing, and getting as many hits as we can with social media has been a big one for us. One of the things we are kind of paused our marketing. We'll probably need a director of marketing potentially in the future with the new executive director, and with the creation of the central service provider. We believe that marketing will become one of those common elements that will be shared amongst all the different venues within Kitchener. So we're kind of in a little bit of a holding pattern right now until we see how that unfolds in the next, say, 6 months.
Okay, I look forward to, getting some presentation in next year of seeing those changes. And just one more time, again, I would love to see a much higher target for that other revenue next year. Thank you.
Yep, I would too, for sure.
Thank you. Councillor O'Dooney?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Dan, for your presentation. Having a chance to just go through the website and looking at the events that are coming up over next few months looks quite exciting. My question is in line with Councillor Singh's question. With a lot of Kitchener's changing, I would say, on a yearly basis with the different groups of people and demography changing as well. Do we have plans, not just in terms of marketing, but also in terms of events and shows to ensure that we're also capturing their attention? Would love your thoughts on that.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. We continue to look at what the community wants as a whole and try to cater to those events that can best serve our community. We've done a number of things. One of the things we're doing right now is we are going back to promoting the Center in the Square with schools. I think tomorrow we have 2 shows where we're bringing students in from the Waterloo Region District School Board to watch a show in the morning and a show in the afternoon, and our staff has worked hard with the school board to provide that basically at very, very low cost to the students, and the school board has been generous enough to pick up the busing for that. So that's one example of how we're trying to work better and more with the community. The other thing we've done is in June, we've left June a little bit more open, where we're trying to get more student high school graduations. Last year, I think we had 5. Joe can correct me, of course, if I'm wrong. And we've had interest from other ones this year, as well as more local dance groups in. And we want to continue to build with the different cultures throughout the community to continue to make the Center in the Square an option for them.
Yeah, thank you. There's no one else in the queue. I just I'd thank councillors for asking their questions. Councillor Singh, I would agree 100%. I think I would say that in terms of the budget overall, I think there is some ambition in terms of filling some of the dates that are there. But I would say it's otherwise conservative as we are transitioning to a new general manager. And I think one of the top issues will be looking at that other revenue. And I think it's a very, very important question to ask for the 2025 budget. Okay, there is, sorry, Councillor Johnson. I missed you there.
Thank you, Chair Davey. I know it's hard to see me today. Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Carley, for coming in. And I think that you kind of answered one of the questions that I was going to ask about. And it really is that when I think of the Center in the Square, which is such an amazing facility, it kind of reminds me of churches in that, they're busy at certain times, they're busy on Sundays, and they're always looking for ways of bringing people in during the week and filling their spaces and making revenue. So I was happy to hear you mention that your work with the school boards to try and get some new and younger audiences in. I actually hope that we would also look to be charging some money for doing that as well, besides having them cover the cost of buses. I'm also thinking, though, of our work with our post-secondary institutions and their music programs, their theater programs, etc. And in fact, just guest lecturers and things, because I'll tell you, oftentimes post-secondary institutions, space truly is the final frontier there for finding opportunities to have guest speakers in, etc. I'm wondering if you can maybe talk to your outreach to maybe some of those different groups as well.
I'm going to let Joe Henning, the general manager, speak to that, because he does talk regularly to the different post-secondary institutions in the city.
Mr. Henry.
I guess through Mr. Chair, the universities both have been going through some major renovations in their venues. So
I'm sorry, I can't hear him. Maybe it's just me.
Yeah, maybe if you could pull the microphones up just a little bit there.
There we go. We've been working with we've been speaking with both universities. They both have gone through major renovations in their performance venues. But I would say that it is a bit of a challenge to get university-based activities to the center. Have had some interest from one of their sort of off-site programs that I like to work with if we can. But for those venues, when they have their own, especially the post-secondary ones, the center and the square can be a daunting place to be in terms of the costs associated with being there. So, we're really focusing on the primary school to start with. That was in the transition when I sort of was asked to take over. One of the priorities that Dan and I talked about was working with the school to get the school shows back started, and as well working with the high schools in terms of trying to work with various programs to get some collaboration with both their co-op programs as well as we've been working with and the Indigenous department at the school boards to try and get some activities at the center that we're hosting in and around the arts organizations and the Indigenous arts as well as the cultural arts as well.
Thank you. I had a hard time hearing that, but I think that one of the things that I picked up was that you said that it was maybe a challenge for students to get there. I will say that I believe now all 3 post-secondary institutions have Grand River Transit passes as part of their student package. So I'm thinking that will make it easier for them to get there. And I'm happy, even though I'm not on the Center and the Square board, to maybe help with some other creative ways of looking at some of that other revenue as well. Thanks for your report.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Deneau.
Thank you, Chair. A quick question. Historically, have you guys had dance competitions at the center?
Are you looking to sign up,
Through
Councillor
you,
Deneau? Sorry, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we have several dance competitions. The dance season is usually run in late May and June. Okay. And Joe can confirm this number, but I think we had 4 or 5, maybe even 6 dance competitions last June, and I think we've got several booked for June 2024.
Awesome. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and Councillor Singh.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, in your efficiency of wanting to run a good meeting, I know you won't like me pitching ideas as a part of this, but I think this is a good opportunity to say it publicly. Again, Mayor Vivenovich, Councillor O'Dooney, myself, and surprisingly, Minister Anand was there as well over the weekend at a Gujarati Diwali festival. And there we saw performances, dance performances done by the youth, and it was really celebrated and well enjoyed by a lot of people there. So the idea and pitch is, and this I think would meet the community development as well, we really got to access and get inroad on the various and growing, thriving cultural communities within our city. One way to do it is allow them to showcase their music and dance numbers on stage, where it's something that could be attended by the wider community. So it's not just within the cultural organization and community that's seen what talent exists, but the wider community can appreciate. And I think there is now funding there through our caring community as a newcomers line item that we can perhaps partner with the SITs, but these are things that we have to start considering and doing.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Singh. There are no more questions. Thank you so much, guys. So we will take, it's actually been a while, so let's take a 5-minute recess. We'll reconvene at about 11:40, okay? Thank you. Okay, thanks everyone. Let's reconvene. We are moving on to our strategic investment options. Mr. Haggie.
Sure. Can I have it so I can advance, please?
we having slide issues? Is that- Okay.
Trying to find the missing cursor, I think. It's hiding. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Thank you. We've already talked a little bit about some of the strategic options this morning. Mr. Lautenbach talked about the $5.5 million that it's already included in the budget. Now it's the time to discuss some of the options that are available to council. As already been mentioned, there's $1 million of unallocated funding, and that's one-time funding that could be allocated towards other strategic options. Staff have looked through the strategic plan and the items that are articulated in there as far as items that we want to move forward with in the next few years, and have developed 10 different options for council's consideration. As has already been talked about, all of the options add up to $2 million, and there's only $1 million available to allocate. So some of the options that are not chosen through this budget cycle will have to wait and be considered in a future budget. It's not as if they're going to go away and we'll never talk about them again. They would just come back in future budgets for council's consideration. There's an issue paper that outlines each of the 10. It's in Appendix F. It's on pages 6 and 7, and it provides a bit more information about each of the options that are being considered here as part of this, and this is the first discussion point for it. It's not the last and only option or only time to talk about it. Mr. Chair, I think it would be prudent to pause, and if there are questions about some of the options and those sorts of things, if council wants to indicate support or not support for different options, I think this would be the appropriate time to start that discussion.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, Mr. Haggie. So just to reiterate to members of committee, so there is $2 million of spending here, and we have $1 million to spend. I think it's really important that maybe each of us cue in and comment on our preferences. I guess I would say in the interests of collaboration, you know, if you're expecting the full $1 million to be spent on the things that you specifically want, that's probably not the best approach. I would recommend maybe highlighting a couple of items that you think are important, but alternatively also commenting on items that you would think would be a poor spend to knock off as well. I think that'll be insightful for when the mayor comes forward with his proposed budget. So cue in when you're ready, or again, if you have questions on any of these items, now would be the time, okay? So we will begin with Councillor Singh.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, you'd be okay with me asking some clarification questions as well?
Certainly, yes.
Okay.
Take it all at once.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that. So I'll try to go more in line with as they presented. The first one is in building a connected city together, 200,000 support, continued implementation of the city's housing for all strategy. Is that more so towards from the planning department in requiring the appropriate staff that we can have the accelerated housing stocks, or is that more specific to affordable housing only? And the reason why I ask in clarification is that in the advancing strategic priorities of the 5.5 million, that we do also have 1.2 million outlined there as well.
Mr. Reedman.
Yeah, through the chair, and so this is funding that would help support Housing for All implementation. So there's about just under 50 actions in that plan, and we've implemented about half of those actions. And so this would be funding to continue to implement those. The other 1.2 million that's indicated here is meant to be partnered with the Housing Accelerator Fund. One of the portions of that program is to provide loans and grants to supportive, not-for-profit, affordable and not-for-profit co-op housing.
No, and that's great. But what I'm saying is the fact that we're able to partner that way, and there's a city share of that, and we're not just advancing the 42.2 million that the feds are giving us. Can this 200,000 somehow be noted from that funding as opposed to coming from the tax base?
Through the mayor, or through the chair, no, this funding couldn't be contributed towards that. It could be used to offset some of the other work that's there. So we've outlined a program to the minister, and it was approved based on that program that's been outlined. And so, we can't take money and redirect it from other sources now. Like, we have to follow the program that we had applied for and the milestones that are within that.
Okay, so not to push this, just for more clarity, so we have all the information available. Some may be considering the extensive advancement of the housing strategy that this council has already committed to, the work that's been done, and then the rationale of us having to commit more the fact that some of this funding is to advance or complete the remaining work of the full implementation of the strategy, perhaps what's been completed and what's remaining to be completed, so we know if we were to take this out, what would be impacted. So for that to be circulated to council ahead of any amendment date, that'd be great. The other is for $300,000 for additional cycling and trail connection. Not to get on a soapbox here, but I think it's been loud and clear amongst this committee and council that trails is crucially important. Segments of our community have advanced the cycling network as well as support by staff suggestions, which have been supported by council. But again, individually, we've been spoken quite supportively that we have to accelerate the trails network in tandem, if not even equally so, if not more. Could this be all outlined towards trails rather than subdividing between the cycling network and enhancing our trails?
Ms. McColmark.
So through the chair, in response to Councillor Singh's question, this funding is intended to increase the accessibility of the trail network and increase connectivity in terms of the wider active transportation network. So where we see lack of connectivity is often related to crossings or inaccessible ability to mount curbs. We also have heard quite a bit in terms of signage, wayfinding signage, and the lack thereof. So this funding is really intended to create a more accessible experience connecting trails into our active transportation network overall.
So that seems to be in not broadening the enhancement of actual kilometers of trails, right? It's more of what's there already, better access utilization of those trails. And the second supplementary question is much of this work going to be outside the downtown? Not to pit the downtown against the suburbs, but the fact is we advance a lot of dedicated cycling network in the downtown, and we want to be in keeping outside the downtown as well.
So through the chair, just in terms of, you're correct that this is around improving the user experience on our trail network, whether it's connecting those uncomfortable pieces, which could be road crossings, or areas where there's gaps in the trails. So there would be some expansion just to address those gaps, but it's really around the accessibility of the user experience, the wayfinding, et cetera. We would prioritize the actual locations, and certainly we can bring forward as that implementation plan is developed, where specifically the monies will be spent. But this is more in that we've done a lot of investment in the downtown, as you've said, and this would be supplementary to that in other areas of the city.
Okay, so if somehow we're able to find some monies from elsewhere that we can supplement on top of this work, could we have some sense of if there's a certain additional number of kilometers of trails that we want enhanced and improved, so year-round access as opposed to the way they are right now? Can staff help to provide that clarity as well?
Okay. Mr. Reedman, you want to add?
So I'll let Ms. McGoldrick finish on this one, but I just want to add about the trail crossings in particular.
Okay, so just in terms of the year-round access, staff, through council's investment last year, continued to invest in expanding the year-round access to trails, so paving trails. And council had invested an additional $600,000 annually as part of last year's budget. So those monies continue to be applied. We have a $600,000 investment annually that we put towards that, which began this past year.
Again, my question was if you want to improve.
Yeah, Councillor, can I get you to just to queue back in? It's giving you a bit of extra time. So
I know, but can I just finish?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah,
I'm not asking anything extra. I just want clarity on this one. So I agree that was my intent. I don't want to monopolize. Could we get information as to if, based on the funding, if you want to increase even further, how much per kilometer, right? Maybe recirculation of that report that we had last year. We don't have to do new work, so that if you're able to find some extra monies, we can outline how many more kilometers on top of what we're already committed to that we could achieve.
Certainly we can provide an updated unit cost for those trail upgrades.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Dooney.
Thank you very much, Chair. Wanted to make my comments around this, just looking over the 300,000 for additional cycling and trail connections. I know this was just discussed, but I feel like we've done a good job with the cycling paths so far, and would prefer if we do less of that and just focus more on the trail connections. I don't know if there's a chance that those could be separated. And then also, I still would love to see more work around traffic calming. I know that was something that was added last year. That, for me, is still the #1 complaint and concern that I hear. I know it's not here, but I would love if it's not going to be in investment options, it's put somewhere else, but that's a major area that I would love to see more work done. But those are my comments on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Michaud.
Thank you. Would it be possible to get the list, Ms. McGoldrick, of where these connections and trails for this active transportation piece are going to take place? Like, I'm just wondering the area in the city, like where is it concentrating, or is it? I'd like to know what trails are being enhanced or making it more accessible, and what crossings are being more enhanced as well. Is that possible to get that?
Ms. McGoldrick.
So through the chair, our trails team in parks is working with the active transportation team in our transportation services group to prioritize that list based on the cycling and trails master plan. I will check in to see the status of that. I'm not sure if that planning work will be completed within the next couple of weeks, but can certainly look into that.
So, and forgive me, I guess I'm wondering how you come up with the $300,000 if you don't know exactly how many. That's sort of black and white.
Mr. Reedman?
Yeah, through the chair. So our Cycling and Trails Master Plan was focused on active transportation in totality. So it's not just cyclists, it's also about people using our trails for walking and other modes. There was a number of hotspots that were identified through that master plan. So there were red circles on one of the maps that showed all the areas where trails crossed roadways. We don't have budget right now that's aimed towards fixing those unless the road is going through a reconstruction project. And so this funding was meant to really improve those crossings. So there's an example of a reconstruction in Councillor Snyder's ward on Conway, where we've actually done a raised crossing for the Don Cardillo Trail, but that was through a reconstruction project. This is to fast track those crossings in areas where no reconstruction is planned for 20 or 30 years.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Davey. I want to add my support to the previous comments made by fellow councillors about more focus on our trails. One of the things I would love to see is the trails that are throughout the neighborhoods. They're not named, and somebody can go on there and have no clue where they're headed or where some of the branch-off trails go to. It's one comment that I've heard. We have great trails in my ward. You can get on a trail and walk all the way to Fairway Road, but if you don't know that or there's no wayfinding, you're not aware of it. So this is something, I know we're talking about the connectivity, but I also want to see a focus on the wayfinding for the trails that are inside the different neighborhoods throughout our ward. So, maybe that's one of the things that I could bring forward later on, but if there's comments on that, I think that would be helpful.
Mr. Reedman?
Yeah, through the chair, and so through our Cycling and Trails Master Plan as well, we've identified the need to do a comprehensive wayfinding strategy for all of our on- and off-road facilities. And so I know the team is working on that right now to look at our main connectors across the city and using some best practices from other places where you actually create something that looks like a subway map where you color code routes through the city. It helps, especially younger people, people with mental cognition challenges to really wayfind when you have sort of a symbol and color-coded network. And so that work is well underway, and so that work is planned to be implemented. And then also within this item number 2, it includes pavement markings and sign upgrades, and so that's exactly what you're referring to is better wayfinding at those connection points.
Yeah, that's something I would love to see, like, sped up. I hear from my constituents, people say, well, just hop on the trail. You come on the sidewalk, you see a pathway, but there's no indication that it even is a trail. So anything to do to speed that up would be great.
Thank you. Councillor Deneau?
Thank you, Chair Davey. And I didn't realize we'd be talking this much about trails today, so I guess that's a good thing, as I see it as an important issue in our city. I'm wondering if it's possible, and I mentioned this to Councillor Singh, we have part of our advancing our strategic priorities. We have $700,000 to the implementation of the continuing of the downtown cycling grid. Would we be able to move any of those funds into the area of the trails, but completing the trails, some of the trails in our parks that are still left to be completed, as far as paved versus stone dust or dirt?
I have Mr. Reedman and Ms. McGoldrick. Whoever wants to take it, go ahead.
Through the chair, and so that $700,000 was the remainder of the downtown grid that council had approved a few years ago. And so the remaining connection that we're planning to install is Water Street to the CN rail lines, which is going to be on Duke Street. So Metrolinx, as they're reconstructing the transit terminal, it will be an active transportation connection under Duke Street. And so this is a key connection to make sure that active transportation users can connect that component. And then the other phase is the other end of Duke Street from Frederick east to the end of the network. We also have Housing Accelerator Fund allocated towards the downtown grid. So we have $2 million to complement the $700,000 in this. And so for us to implement that Housing Accelerator Fund commitment to finish our downtown grid, we need that $700,000. And part of the intent of this is to make sure that as we densify our downtown core, that we have active transportation options for people so that we're not in congestion in our downtown. And so really we have one last connection on our downtown grid, which is scheduled for next year, and that's where this funding had been allocated.
Okay. Ms. McGoldrick, you want to add?
So through the chair to Councillor Deneau's question around paving trails within parks that were not paved as part of original trail works. Currently, the priority is to direct trail upgrades to the priorities identified through the Cycling and Trail Master Plan. As Council would have received the update report, I believe it was perhaps in August or September of this year, in terms of progress. We are progressing very well in terms of implementing the Cycling and Trails Master Plan as it relates to trails. That is a significant reflection of the investments that Council has made over the last few years. And so we have almost completed the 10-year work plan within approximately 3 to 4 years. And so at that point, as we look to implement the remaining high priority trail upgrades, we can look to go back to see what other areas would benefit from increased accessibility, year-round maintenance as well.
Okay, thank you for that answer. And I'm sure we'll have more discussion over the next few years. And so looking at the other options, as a rec guy, I think having recreation programs and or access to programs and or actual equipment is important for our city, especially considering, lots of people are coming in and living in apartments and they don't have access to necessarily playgrounds or space on their own property. And so, the 2 additional playground replacements in 2024, I think is very important to do. And I was reading that additionally to the other 4 that may be replaced in 2024 as well. And lastly, I didn't realize that Cameron Heights Pool was limited in its usage. And so I think that's an important part to possibly free up some of our swimming programs, because I know as a parent who has to register their kids in swimming lessons, that if you don't get it right away, it's really tough to get A, what you want, or B, to get anything for that matter after it opens within a short period of time. So I would love to see that actually implemented during this budget to hopefully lighten the load off some of those programs at the other community pools. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ioannidis.
Are we discussing what's on the screen right now?
Yeah, apologies. So you missed the part, but this would be a good opportunity for you to state not only, hopefully, not the full $1 million, but a couple of items here that are important to you, and potentially items perhaps that you think we shouldn't be spending money on, as the advice to the mayor when he brings back a potentially different budget.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm sure it's been mentioned a few times around here. The additional $300K for cycling, I think something is that I won't support. I think it's we've gone. I think we can slow that down a little bit. I mean, development is going to happen, but I mean, if we push this over several years, I think it'll be beneficial. I'm all for with the additionals of trails. To me, that's where I've been hearing 90% of any issue is around trails. As far as fostering and carrying a city together, I would support $300K with the increase of Cameron Heights pool. I think that's very important, and I know we have very few pools, and if anything that we can do to increase that, that would be something that I would definitely support. The 200 stewarding a better city, 100K for digitals, I would support that, and the 200 data strategy. I think we need to utilize our tools better. I think we need to get with the AI and everything else. I think we need to look forward to that. And then I'm not sure if I missed the other one. Oh, the green together. I'm very supportive of adding, if it's whatever it is, to the Energy Star, and I would see playgrounds replacements as something important. But those are where I would actively want to put our funds.
Thank you, Councillor Ioannidis. Before we go for second round, I will make some comments myself on preference. First and foremost, I think option E, I think, is very important. The digital Kitchener strategy to investigate adopting new technologies. I am a firm believer that we are about to be hit by a wave of artificial intelligence technologies that will dramatically change how much work any individual member of our staff can do to the benefit of our residents. And I think this is one of the areas we need to be on the forefront. So that's the $100,000 at the beginning, but most importantly, wrapped in that is you can't have any artificial intelligence help you with decisions unless you've collected the data for the artificial intelligence to process, which means we need the second part of that. So I'm personally very keen on that particular one. I would also add, I would ask too, when staff comes back with the trails, if they could just include what's been done in previous years, because I recall that we did a fairly significant expenditure in the last budget as well, and I'm very supportive of it. I just think that we need to perhaps spread some of our progressive spending around a little bit and make sure that it's appropriate, and we're looking back at what we've already done. I would also agree with Councillor Ioannidis and Councillor Deneau that $300,000 came as a bit of a surprise for Cameron Heights Pool, but when you look at the information, it's almost like $300,000 for opening a new pool in terms of how much more usage we will get out of the pool. So that one just makes a whole lot of value sense to me, and I would support that. And finally, I'm not going to allocate it all, but I would also support the 2 additional playgrounds. This is the sort of stuff that I love being a councillor for, seeing actual playgrounds replaced in the city of Kitchener for our youth. And as much as I'd love to add even more here, I think that that's a reasonable amount. Okay, going around again for a second round, I have Councillor Deneau.
Sorry, Chair. Councillor Johnston's hand is raised.
Oh, apologies, Councillor Johnson. Go ahead when you're ready.
Thanks, Councillor Davey. In fact, I had thought I had raised it earlier and thought, why isn't he coming to me? And I hadn't raised it until you started speaking. So thanks very much, Councillor Davey. And I want to say thank you for this report. I echo a number of comments that have already been made. Certainly, actually I had a question around this one. Is $300,000 enough to do 2 additional playgrounds. And perhaps Ms. McGoldrick can answer this question, but I remember a few years ago when Mr. Nobley was here, and we had a report with regards to the state of our playgrounds and when they should be being updated and turned over. And I think that many of them at the time were before their best before date. I'm wondering if we can get an update maybe on those stats. Also, is $300,000 enough to do 2 good playgrounds?
Ms. McGoldrick. Frozen mouse, sorry. There we go. Go ahead.
Thank you. So through the chair, the $150,000 per playground was costed based on the most available tender information that we have for playgrounds. We do feel that that is reasonable. Of course, we've been watching the inflationary trends as well, and utilize 2023 costing to come up with that. And what would typically add costs in terms of playgrounds is when we're looking at full park rehabilitation, reconstruction, and so certainly that is more than the $150,000 per playground, but this is specific to replacing the playground and adding access to the playground through accessibility upgrades such as trail connections to them. So that is based on most recent costing. And then just in terms of, Councillor Johnson, thank you for the question in terms of kind of the life cycle of our playgrounds and how that relates to our current inventory. And so we estimate the useful life of playgrounds to be approximately 20 years old. That's based on typically manufacturer's advice. Now we know we can extend the life of playgrounds by replacing parts, and we do regular inspections of the playgrounds to ensure that they're safe. So we say estimated life of 20 years, but we know we can extend that. And 45% of our inventory of 154 playgrounds are at or exceed the useful life. So there is a need for a larger and longer term asset management strategy as it relates to playgrounds. That is something that will come in terms of discussion through the Places and Spaces strategy, but we need to start to address some of the backlog.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And you know what, I had assumed that was probably the answer. I don't think that my kids will mind, but my kids are 31 and 29, and there's still a number of parks that I took them to play in, which haven't seen any changes since they were, younger kids playing in those parks. So I do think that it's an important piece for us to keep in mind, especially when economic times are tough. You know what? What do you do with your kids? You pack some sandwiches, bring some snacks with you, and take your kids to the park is a wonderful way to be able to spend a day. And just ensuring that those are staying or in our minds that we need to be looking at replacing more of those, I think is going to become more and more important. So that's top of mind to me. I know there were some questions earlier about the trails. I must say I went on a bike ride with Darren Kropp and a cycling committee volunteer through my ward, and maybe my ward was lucky and had seen the Henry Stern Trail, for example, was stone dust a few years ago, and now it's a beautiful two-way paved trail, and with connectivity to bridges and that can get you from Ward 9 all the way over to Fisher Hallman, which was lovely, across Lawrence Avenue and Westmont Road with some raised trail crossings, which was really great. So I'm very appreciative of that. I'd like to see more of that. I agree with what is being talked about with others on council, that doing more of that paving just makes them that much more accessible. The other thing I'm wondering about with our trails, though, is I'm hearing from lots of people that they would like to have more lit trails. What is happening with that piece? And can we add that?
Ms. McGoldrick.
So through the chair, currently the emphasis on lit trails is on those major commuter trailways, which would be the Iron Horse Trail, I'm trying to think of the name of
Spurline.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. But not necessarily other trailways. Lighting is very expensive and has an ongoing operating impact. So at this point, it's not part of our regular standard for trails.
I'm hoping that that's something that we continue to consider as part of our budgeting. I think it just makes, it's dark by 5 o'clock now at this time of year. And for anybody who does want to commute, that really stands in the way of people being able to do that. The other thing I wanted, a couple more things. I'm wondering about, and I could be putting this in the wrong spot as well, but again, under the Green City Together, our tree replacement piece, and the length of time that it's taking even to get, if you get your tree removed, to get the stump round, it's probably another year, and then again another year to get a tree replaced. I know that Councillor Ioannidis has brought this up in the past as well. I couldn't hear all of the conversation this morning, so it might have come up earlier. I'm wondering where, if putting more into that, apparently there was going to be more money put into that, and I'm wondering if someone can comment on that, please. Maybe it's in here and I just didn't see it.
Ms. McGoldrick.
So through the chair, not specifically in this issue paper, but there's another issue paper, I believe 05. Mr. Hagee is saying that my memory serves me well. OP 05, or if she.
Okay.
There is 2 staffing requests, which is a continuation from last year in terms of the resourcing to achieve the urban forest canopy target, which also includes the tree replacement planting. Currently, you are correct, we've improved the turnaround time on from removal to stumping to replacement to be a 3-year turnaround time. Some members of council may recall when it was in the order of at least 5 years for that cycle to complete. So we are aggressively moving forward in tree planting replacements, but it is still currently a 3-year turnaround time.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Davey, I can't see the clock. I'm assuming I'm at time, am I?
Yes, I thought I'd let you finish up.
Okay, thank you. I'll key back in then. So I'll just leave it up and you come back to me then. Thank you. That's easier.
Thank you, and while on this point too, I hope in the budget is a replacement of our sound system so I can better understand people are here. Next, who hasn't spoken, Mayor Verbenovich.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thanks staff for the list that's in front of us. Couple questions. First of all, on the playgrounds, with the suggestion for 2 additional playground replacements, is that are we restricted to 2 there because of staff capacity, or is that something that if there were additional dollars there could be accommodated?
Ms. McGoldrick.
Through the chair, that is related to looking at our capacity to be able to deliver, and that threshold is around 2. We would need to look at additional staffing resources to support additional playground replacement.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification. And just to be clear, in terms of the Cameron Heights pool, like right now, this is to create a separate access from the outside so that people don't need to go into the school, correct?
Through the chair, yes, it's a separate access dedicated to, and the area that we're focusing on requires AODA work, accessibility, and some improvements for staffing supervision.
So would that actually have operational savings for us as well then? Because I'm presuming that right now we're probably covering some of the operating costs for the school to have custodial staff there and so on?
This actually won't change the connections to the school itself from all the mechanical. I think our custodial it would still involve some of the custodial work from the school.
Sorry, so people would still need to go into the school to access the pool or no?
No one would need to go through the school, so there's no additional hours from a custodial perspective that would be
But
required.
I'm thinking there'll be less hours because right now, when custodial staff have to be there to keep the school unlocked and so on, if that is gone, will we not have some operational savings?
Sorry, through the chair, not since COVID. We've been operating a little differently through COVID since then, so it right now would remain the same from an operational standpoint.
Sorry, so just can someone provide just some clarity so we clearly understand how people are accessing now and how will they access it in the future with this change?
So through to the chair, right now.
Speak close to the mic.
Sorry.
Mark.
Right now, we since COVID, we've been operating as entering through the patio doors to enter into the facility. We haven't been able to return into the school, so we haven't been using any custodial to operate. So there won't be any changes in regards to that. But what it will do is free up time throughout the day for us to provide programming.
Gotcha. So like right now, everyone comes in through the outside?
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And going for a second round, Councillor Michaud.
Thank you. So in the suburbs, and I think I can speak for most of council here, one of the largest amount of complaints we get is with regard to traffic calming, speeding, just erratic drivers. And while our staff are doing a great job in trying to calm traffic down, there isn't enough supports to put pieces in place to continue on the trajectory. And I would argue that we're putting a lot of dollars into the downtown cycling infrastructure, which I totally understand. We've committed to that. But the suburbs have exploded outwards where there's a lot more population and there's a lot more traffic. So I'd like to see the active transportation piece in this issue paper, that 300,000 move to the traffic calming piece.
Okay, so yeah, I'll take that as a comment, but that is something that you will have to discuss and potentially bring as an amendment after speaking with staff and the mayor as well in his decisions. Next is Councillor Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think of all the things that we all want to do, because all these suggestions seem to be exactly what a community needs, it's going to be challenging for us to meet that 1 million. So just more of a comment before I give some additional feedback is, I hate to be that guy to the cringe of Mr. Lautenbach, Mr. Hagee, and Mr. Chapman, and likely the mayor. We may have to look at ways within the base budget. We have to look at reserves. We may have to look at the 5.5 million strategic priorities of reorienting, because we won't be able to do it all within just the 1 million that we have outlined. So saying that very quickly, just more of a feedback to staff. I will look to staff to see if there's avenue for them to readdress the 200,000 to support the continued implementation of the housing strategy, if there is some other funding out there, or if that can be reoriented differently so that it doesn't have to come from the million here. The 300,000 for the trails enhancement, what I've heard from staff as a comment or reply back, it really is more of trails enhancement. It's not on the cycling. Although cycling is there, it's really trails that we already have that have been asphalted, that are winter maintained, but they have curb cuts that are required. So that's something I think we do have to look at. I think Councillor Michaud, you asked for it, and it was a good question. It would be helpful for us to have a high-level idea of the number of those improvements that would be done perhaps at the suburb. Again, I say it's not about the downtown and the suburbs. Significant investments have continued to be made in the downtown. We just have to be answerable to our voters and constituents to outline the enhancements that are happening in the respective wards outside as well. So having that information will be helpful. The other is $200,000 for the development of arena energy strategy. Again, that's great to see, but if staff can somehow pinpoint some investments that can be made from efficiencies that can be implemented that are cost savings so that it can fund itself, so it could be a sustainable measure. Again, within all the priorities right now, that may be a challenge for us to get that. I'll look to staff to see if they can comment. The other is accelerate commercial business approvals, although that's important. Again, if you can look at the user rates, for what's required for the licensing fee, if you can fund within the applications to enhance our ability to get those approvals done faster, but again, it's paid by the user as opposed to from the tax base, be it capital even, I think that'd be a more prudent way of going. The other thing I really want to comment is on the 200,000 newcomer strategy, and sadly, no one else has really addressed this. I'm sure it's important to most of us. Almost 25% of the community is not someone that has been born in Canada within the community. They come from elsewhere. And again, our community is changing drastically at a fast pace where we do have substantive newcomers. I'm not talking about the diversity of culturally, I'm talking about people coming from the GTA necessarily, because this is a better community. These are new people coming here that will take a long time for them to immerse and understand exactly the benefits and all the assets that this community has. We have to make it a priority for ourselves to enclose them within our community and try to leverage on their assets that they bring forward. Some of the things that, I brought this up, Mr. May, and I've articulated this to Mayor Voinovich, a motion that I'm really pushing or considering bringing forward is having an event that highlights or appreciates the new residents and newcomers to our city, like a citywide event where we can bring all the stakeholders, all the agencies, all the volunteering opportunities that exist in our community, have a launch where everyone can come forward and seeing exactly how they can take part, how they can feel included. That can't be done unless we make this a priority. I think this is necessary as well, and I'll be really encouraging this 200,000. The last bit, appreciate Mr. Mayor outlining the 300,000 for our Cameron Heights, if there's a different way of doing it. For me, the 100,000 for the digital kitchen strategy, I think that's important. I think that's going to be access to better efficiencies of the way that we deliver our services, or the better way we communicate the services that we do have. And at the same time, again, as the chair has noted, there's different implementations of AI that we could do that we can deliver that. This 100,000, I think, could be a way of savings down the road. It may be a cost right now, but may lead to savings, and I think we need to look at that. So again, the things that I've noted out, some of the feedback I'm providing staff is for us to internally look and see if we can support them in a different way. And perhaps I think we have to have that conversation amongst ourselves to see how we can find some efficiencies within the base budget or reorient towards the priorities that we have outlined. Thank you. That's my comment.
Mr. Chapman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to comment. And I appreciate it was a comment, not a question, but I do want to validate the councillor's comments. The strategic plan is very new, and so we recognize that not all these items will be supported by council through this budget process. What we've identified is a work plan over the next 4 years, and we wanted to put out priority areas that we think are priorities for council that you can say these are important to get on right away as you launch the new budget process for 2024. Our commitment for items that are not approved through the budget, unless council says no, don't do any work on it, is to go away and figure out what is the approach to move it forward. And it may move forward more slowly, it may take a different scope or tactic, but these are all things that we've heard are important. They will move forward. I think what's key is to understand from council what's urgent for day one through the 2024 budget. Those will move forward through the budget. The rest we will bring back through our work plans, and as you said, find alternate ways to advance them, look at different budget processes or alternative financing. But really what's important is, as Chair Davey has said, is to hear for the 2024 budget what's top of mind for council that you want to see action on immediately.
Thank you. Councillor Duneau?
Thank you, Chair Davey. And it's great to hear some of my fellow councillors talking about the playground. I can tell you right now, there's a new playground that is within a snowball from my house, and the excitement, not just from my daughters, but from a lot of the kids they go to school with, it's probably 90% complete. And as the words of my 9-year-old yesterday, what's taking them so long? But when it is open, what it looked like compared to what it's going to look like when it's finished, I think it's going to be a great asset to our community. And you know, if my community is excited, you know, about a new playground, a new, you know, seating, and you know, I can't imagine what the other wards will be happy for that as well. And I just want to ask Ms. McGoldrick a quick question. As far as, you know, Councillor Schneider talked about signage. If we look at this $300,000 overall, what, you know, to improve signage for our active transportation, like, do we have an idea of what we have to do still in what areas and how much that would encompass just signage itself?
Ms. McGoldrick.
So through the chair, I don't have that information available, but what I can say is that the majority of our trails would benefit from improved wayfinding signage. So previously, the city standard may be, particularly for trails that are named, is to provide a name, but not necessarily to identify length and duration to get to a certain point of destination. And that takes detailed planning work to be able to assess, like, what are those destination areas, what are the distance, and then, of course, the implementation of the appropriate signage. There was an initial standardization of sign work done and first implemented along the Iron Horse Trail. So we have really wonderful signage along the Iron Horse Trail, but there's a lot more signage that needs to be rolled out across the city. And the current approach is to do that as those trail upgrades or new trails are being implemented. What we've heard from council through discussions when we brought forward the update report is a desire to see that accelerated beyond where we're just investing in trails, but look at a greater acceleration in terms of rollout across city trails. So that's something we're looking at.
Okay, so having somebody do that research and map everything out, would that be part of this $300,000, or is that separate? Go ahead.
So through the chair, so that is work that is underway right now and is being done in collaboration between the Parks team and the Transportation team. We do need to, and so then it's around we need to look at the prioritization of the rollout of that signage, which part of the monies, the $300,000, is intended to initiate the rollout of signage.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair Davey. I guess where I'm looking at is I'm going to look at the chart with the advancing strategic priorities, and I do appreciate the comments that were made about some of these could be tweaked and all that stuff. I think that's a good way to go. One of the things I'm kind of looking at is I'm really happy to see this $240K for special events and the launch of a new festival. And by the way, Councillor Singh, it's called the Multicultural Festival, the one that you're asking for. I'm just kidding. But anyways, I want to know how much funds dedicated towards Oktoberfest in this 240.
You could speak to that. Mr. Reed.
Through the chair, I don't have that number off the top of my head. I could get that for you.
Yeah, I think that would be good because I just want to know exactly where we're going with this, and I feel like they could be a little bit more inclusive to the community with regards to some of the funding we provide them.
Okay, there's no one else in the queue. I just wanted to acknowledge that, as reiterated by Mr. Chapman, our goal here. And I wanted to actually specifically ask about the $200,000, the Housing for All piece. Did staff, I'm assuming this was compiled prior to the federal announcement of the $44 million. Mr. Lautenbach?
So through the chair, that's correct in terms of the options that were put forward. They were in development when, before we had confirmation that we were receiving the Housing Accelerator Fund.
and certainly as what's been indicated, the list is still, an important priorities that we see as options. It was never intended that all of these things would need to proceed in 2024. Whatever's not supported, you will likely see them come back, either through the 2025 budget, or as Mr. Chapman said, we'll find other ways through the year where we can look at how do we enable, continue to make that progress that we need to see on the strategic plan. So certainly, the significant investment from the Housing Accelerator Fund, did come after, and so that might be a consideration when you think about the list of priorities.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I think that's important just because I wouldn't want anyone to take the impression that, not investing in this is not supporting that, because as far as I'm concerned, our municipality is going above and beyond and then a whole lot further when it comes to dealing with those issues. The other question I had is with respect to, and no one's mentioned it, but with respect to the Arts and Culture Master Plan, is there, and I'm just throwing it out there just because I know we're asking for everything, but is there any space in the Economic Development Reserve perhaps to fund this? Mr. Reedman.
Yeah, through the chair. So that is something we could take back and look at, should council not want to prioritize it, similar to what Mr. Chapman had said earlier.
Okay, very good. Yeah, so just in closing on this, I do feel a little like we've put out quite a few more options than we can afford to spend. And I would caution committee that, staff goes out of their way, I think, to make sure that there is some flexibility in the budget process for us, because we've all been accused or heard the issues related to how much we actually impact the budget at budget time. So they come forward with a great number of options, all of which are important, and there's many things that were mentioned that aren't on this list that are important, but it really is our duty and our discipline to make sure that we come in at that $1 million, in my opinion, to the point where even if some of the items that I'm very passionate about don't make the cut, I won't be going over above that budget. So I would encourage members of committee, as they're engaging with the mayor, to really try and prioritize and stay in under that. Mayor Rabinovich.
Thanks. But just before I comment, I see Councillor Johnson.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Johnson. I keep missing you there. Please go ahead.
That's okay, Councillor Davey. Though you did a really good wrap up there, but thank you. I have the last question on the 100,000 to accelerate commercial business approvals. I'm wondering, I didn't know actually that this was an issue. I'm wondering if someone can speak to that. Also, is this not something that should pay for itself? Is it not something that we can maybe look at the cost line? And I'll let someone answer that. Thanks.
Mr. Reedman.
Through the chair, and so this was a project that was identified about 6 or 8 months ago, and so it was identified in our strategic plan as a key item to fast track commercial business openings. And so what we heard coming out of the pandemic is that it's very precarious to open a small business. And we've already completed the initial interviews with people that have opened businesses in the last couple of years to understand where the pain points in that process are. And so we're getting really good information back from them on how we can streamline our internal processes to improve things. And so this is similar to what we did for the Development Services Review, where we did a review of site plan and got that program down from almost years-long process, 60 to 120 days, depending on the type of application. And so that's what's envisioned in the scope of work, is to really fast-track, and coordinate and make sure that we're working together internally to support business approvals.
So is the issue that we don't have enough staff putting these through, or what is the issue?
Through the chair, and so the issue on this, what we're finding is there's a lack of coordination between departments. There's different systems that don't talk to each other. So similar things that we have found in the other, in the Development Services Review. It's just nobody had taken a step back to look at the process mapping from end to end and identify where we could be more supportive and more efficient in our process. And so we don't have recommendations yet. They're due in early in 2024, but we anticipate, that we'll need some funding to implement some systems changes and process changes.
Okay, it looks like 100,000 seems to be a lot for that, so that would be my question around that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Rabinovich.
Thanks, Chair Davey. And just one as a follow-up to that, and then building on your closing comment. On that item,
Mr. Reedman, is it, can we not use the building permit, you know, not fund, but what's the word I'm looking for? Sorry? The enterprise, thank you. I didn't want to call it the BFF fund because somebody's already taken that one. Can we not use that fund to cover this? Because at the end of the day, it's going to lower costs for businesses and so on.
Mr. Reedman.
Through the chair, so that is a potential. What we'd have to be careful of is making sure that the improvements that we're funding are totally building-related expenses. We know there's a bunch of other teams that interface with this, and so $100,000 is really a placeholder right now, just anticipating how much it would cost based on our development services review and the fees that were applied or the improvements that were done through that program. And so it is something I could take back and talk to our director of building on, but there may be improvements that are needed in other areas, which building may not be able to justify funding those components of the process.
Okay. We can talk some more about that because that's be an interesting thing to explore. But I do just want to reiterate the comments that Chair Davey made. I mean, part of our budget process that works really well in comparison to a lot of other municipalities is that there's this shared understanding of joint responsibility between us and our senior leadership team in terms of, you know, how we work towards getting to the budgets that we do, and they work really hard to get it down and do a lot of the heavy lifting for us. So, you know, it's as we consider this and go into the continuing budget discussions, it's important that we collectively, you know, while looking at some alternatives and alternative funding options, I think is legitimate. We also want to make sure that we're doing our part in terms of that that understanding from an approach perspective, because I'd hate to get back to the days where, you know, we would start with like a 6 or 7% budget and then try to whittle it down over budget days and stuff. I don't think it's an effective way to do the work that we need to do.
I would agree. I do not see anyone else in the queue on this. So, Mr. Haggie, you continuing for us?
Sure. So the next section we'll move into is the base tax supported operating budget. We've already talked about this morning. The proposed tax rate increase is 3.9%. You can see that on the right-hand side of the graphic here, and essentially that's the tax rate that needs to be approved in order to fund all of the expenses. So on the left side, you see the stacked bar of all the expenses going up. We have some additional revenues coming in from assessment growth and changes in user fees, and essentially what can't be funded any other way defaults down to the tax base. We've broken out a little bit about what makes up the additional costs for continuing our core services. Should be no surprise that salary and wages is the largest component of it. Earlier in the day, we were looking at a graph that showed that they make up more than half of our cost elements. And so they're a major driver behind our tax rate increase for 2024. Other large components include things like materials and contract services. Mr. Lautenbach alluded to those already this morning as well. So things like increased costs of road salt or other materials that go into providing the services that we deliver every single day. Contracted services, so licensing agreements for software and the like, those costs are driving up as well. We've talked about the boards already here this morning, and they're getting increases, so that's, again, a cost increase to our tax base. And then capital funding, which we've already mentioned. There is a breakdown by division shown in Appendix B on pages 1 and 2, and that just shows by division where the costs are going, which ones are going up, and there are explanations for some of the larger increases provided in that appendix. Looking at the share of property taxes, so the city collects all of the taxes for the region, the city, and education. We get all the phone calls about it. There was already been a discussion this morning about how the regional increase is higher in percentage and they're a larger proportion of the tax bill. So it is quite likely that the fellow workers on my floor 3 are going to be getting a lot of phone calls about people having to pay more, and a lot of it is going to be related to the regional increase, and they make up more than half of the entire tax bill. User fees are one of the funding sources that we talked about just a few minutes ago. Is something, if we want to avoid tax rate increases, user fees are one of the methods that we can do that. They're generally charged for services where people have a choice. And the increase on user fees is very similar to tax rate increase, 3.9 on the tax side, 4% here. There is an entire appendix about it. Appendix E has the entire user fee schedule. There's an issue paper in section F that provides some details about things that are changing when it's different than 4%. And there are plenty of good reasons on why that happens. We look at, there's some that are legislated. We look at other municipalities, what they're charging, or competitors where we're in a similar space as somebody else. Or just a review over time. So it's happened in planning before. With the development review, we looked at what we were charging and right-sized those fees to recover the costs of delivering those services. All of that information is provided in the details are in Appendix E, and the issue paper is in Appendix F. And just to close off this section, there are 2 other issue papers related to the tax-supported operating budget. One around KW Symphony funding, and the other that's already been alluded to here this afternoon about additional staffing resources required to continue delivering services that our citizens rely on. So that's a quick overview of the tax-supported operating budget, and if there are any questions on any of these sections, we can do that before we move on to enterprises.
I don't see any. I do have one. Oh, Councillor Deneau, do you want to go ahead?
Quick one. Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at 325, the FOB, $10. I guess it's a new charge. Does the $10 cover the administration of giving out the FOB, buying the FOB, programming the FOB? Does the $10 cover that?
I'll turn that to Mr.
Reedman.
Yeah, through the chair, and that was the intent of it originally. It was a deposit, and then we would actually give it back when they return the FOB. We're finding people aren't actually returning the FOB, so just collecting the $10 and then not making arrangements for them to return them. We can deactivate them, at a later date and time when they're not being used, but we weren't seeing the return of them, so.
We're not losing any money outside of that $10. We're not losing anything over an extra, right? Okay, thank you.
I just have one question. Is this, I don't recall for the Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony funding, have we discussed, is this the first time I'm seeing that this funding is being reallocated to the Conrad Centre? Because Mr. Chapman.
Through the chair, this is the first time that council since the insolvency of the Symphony would have been discussing their legacy grant. This is not the first time that council has discussed the financial requirements to operate the Conrad Centre. And so certainly council is well aware that to take on operation comes with a subsidy. This has been accelerated by virtue of the Symphony's insolvency. We didn't anticipate that we would be in this position as quickly. So the recommendation here, Councillor Davey, is to basically provide funding to support the agreement with Greenlight Arts that council has endorsed. And council understood the financial implications of that agreement when it entered into it. This will all be subject to further review in the start of 2024 with a full report back to committee.
If I can ask, was that when the agreement with Greenlight Arts, was it made clear at that, and I might be misremembering, but was it made clear at that time that the KW Symphony funding would be redirected there?
I'd have to go back and look at the notes from that discussion, so I can follow up on that.
Okay, yeah, because this one does cause me a bit of concern if it wasn't, because it's a significant amount of money, and I was hoping some of that might go to some of our other strategic initiatives, but we'll park that discussion for another time. Mayor Rabinovich.
Yeah, and listen, I also, I think we need to keep in mind that this is an area that continues to be an active source of conversation in the community. And so I think we want to make sure that whatever we do in the short term recognizes that there's some dollars available to be used this year, but I think we need to think about what that may or may not look like in the future beyond this year.
Okay, thank you. There are no further questions. Please continue. Oh, apologies. Councillor Singh's queued in. Go ahead, Councillor Singh.
I'm so sorry I stepped off for a bit. User fees, we're not on user fees?
Yeah, we're just about to exit that, but go ahead.
Okay, all right. So user fees within planning. Is there an opportunity, going back to the council directed strategic priorities, us essentially perhaps increasing the user rates by a certain percentage more than what's being suggested for us to have sufficient monies of that 200,000 to complete the Housing for All strategy? Is that an avenue that we can look at?
Mr. Reedman.
Through the chair, and so user rates for planning fees are somewhat regulated by the province, and so we went through a fee study. We had to do activity-based costing to make sure that we were collecting fair revenues from applicants through that process, and there is an appeal process available to applicants through that as well. And so that's meant to recover the staff time, not to fund other initiatives through our fees. And so my recommendation would be not to increase those fees to cover, funding other studies, but we'll take it back and look at other opportunities.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. But that being said, they are inflationary. I know that we're coming in below inflation. That's great, but that's not to say that our staffing and costs within our departments are still have to be experiencing that higher pressure with inflation. So the suggested items are noted for increase at 4%. I would be outside of keeping if it's like percent more at 5 as opposed to 4.
Just to clarify, Councillor Singh, I think Mr. Reedman said it's not inflationary. It's based on their cost recovery, which would include like all of their costs. So they can't go above that and then use it to fund a different program. Is that correct? Mr. Reedman.
Yeah, through the chair, and so that's my understanding, is that these are meant to cover the costs, and so we can pay staff salaries and things through that, but we went through a whole fee review study last year for the first time in, I believe it was 10 years, to really reset those fees, and so we had to go through line by line. We did find one of the fees was actually over-collecting based on our estimation, and so we had an error there, and so we're actually refunding the fees for that application, and so we just want to make sure we're being fair and transparent with the applicants, and when they're applying for Planning Act applications.
Okay, no, that's fair, that's further, so we have to abide by the legislation. But that being said, again, we do have a pressure by the province to accelerate our housing stocks. I know we've done a recent review of our development policies. Do we have appropriate staff level to meet that commitment by the province? And if that's the case, or if that's not the case, are we looking for opportunities to enhance so that into the 2024 budget and recoup those costs within the planning fees?
Through the chair, and so yes, we are looking at making sure that we have skill sets matched, and so we feel like we're in good shape right now. We've added a bunch of new staff, we'll continue to report to council when we need to amend, based on service levels.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. There are no further questions. Mr. Haggie?
The last section of the presentation is about enterprises, which are self-sufficient business lines and are shown here on the screen. As part of this year's budget, we looked at the dividend levels coming from 3 of our enterprises that can and indeed have been paying dividends to the city. The ones that are not listed on the screen are excluded because they're not allowed to pay due to legislation. After staff's review, looking at the performance of these 3 enterprises, we've adjusted the amount of the dividends. We've eliminated the golf dividend completely, removing the $75,000 payment from golf to the tax base. Golf has been in a deficit position for over a decade, and so to be paying a dividend from that did not seem appropriate. We've also reduced the parking dividend by $600,000. Parking continues to struggle financially with lower demand due to hybrid or completely remote work arrangements. Therefore, they're not generating as much revenue, and we've adjusted the dividend accordingly. And finally, the gas dividend has been held flat, as staff believe that the current dividend level could potentially be aggressive. Staff will continue to review the dividend amounts for each of these enterprises and make adjustments in future budgets based on performance and best practices. For each of the enterprises, there's a slide that looks like this. It gives a graphic representation of their expected financial performance. It provides where in the budget binder you can look to see, get more information. So in the overview document at the very start of the budget binder, there's some information about customers, recent successes, those sorts of things. So that's provided for each of the enterprises and noted here, or the page numbers are provided here. And then as well in Appendix B, there's the financial forecast for each of them. Won't go through each and every one, but there are representatives available from each of the areas if there are questions, for instance, for building. I see Mr. Sealing is here, if there are any questions.
Okay, are there any questions on golf, building, parking, et cetera? Councillor Singh.
So I see get some understanding the 75,000 rationale eliminating the dividend is, again, it's trying to stabilize the reserve where it's negative right now. And how long have we been running deficits for this enterprise? Even outside the 75,000 dividend.
Sure. I said a decade. I've been here as long as you have, and it's been in deficit the whole time that I've been around.
So when it continues in being in deficit, is it tax supported in that then with the negatives, or is just we run a negative reserve and then look in future years to offset with some revenue when it comes in?
So the stabilization reserve for golf is in deficit. It is paying interest essentially, and so in essence, it's being loaned by the tax side of service because there's
so the tax base is paying the interest on the debt.
In essence, and it will be fully repaid from the golf enterprise as it returns to a positive balance.
And on the parking side, I see the same rationale of a reduction. Did you say it was legislated? I didn't catch that part. No.
No, so parking, golf, and gas are not legislated.
Yeah.
It's the other four that are. So we don't even talk about dividends there because it's a non-starter.
Exactly, okay. I misunderstood exactly. So again, the reduction from 2 million budgeted to 1.4 is again to stabilize the reserve in this
Yes.
section as well.
Yes, and it's the parking enterprise is still struggling even with a reduced dividend amount.
Prior to the pandemic, remind me again, were we in a better position? And obviously we felt difficulties because we just had reduced people coming to the core. Has that played in part in the negative reserve right now?
Yes, the pandemic's a huge part of it. Prior to the pandemic, the parking enterprise was doing all right, generally turning small surpluses, but it tailed off significantly, and it has not returned as quickly as we had hoped.
This is a loaded question. I'm sorry ahead of time.
I'll deflect.
Okay. Yes. The fact that this council, again, our planning policies are moving towards a limited or in some cases zero parking within our core. Are we looking to, on the parking side, that we would have a greater demand on the existing facilities for parking spaces? The fact that the development community is not necessarily building that within their development.
So I actually do think I should deflect that. I don't feel qualified to answer that question.
And as you answer that, this year we budgeted $2 million, and we're projecting at $2 million. So we weren't offline based on our estimate. If you have the data, can you just remind 2022 as well?
Certainly. So through the chair, first question about zero parking in the downtown. And so you're correct. That will at least initially generated an evening rate demand, and so we've piloted a downtown parking evening rate in anticipation of that. The uptake hasn't been there yet, but most of the buildings that have been built, or residential buildings that have been built in the downtown, we haven't seen that uptake in that zero rate yet. As those buildings come on stream, we would expect that evening rate to pick up, and so that's a way to create a shared parking environment, and we would anticipate greater revenue in future years when that occurs. I don't have the 2022 numbers in front of me exactly, but generally speaking, since the beginning of the pandemic, prior to the pandemic, we were able to contribute the $2 million dividend and have still a small surplus that we would then put in the stabilization reserve. Once the pandemic hit, we basically lost that $2 million. So that we're negative $2 million, give or take, on an annual basis right now, which is really what the dividend is.
Just in the remaining.
Sorry, just Mr. Rubin, you want to add?
Yeah, through the chair, and so I just want to remind council that we did apply a lot of Safe Restart funding to the parking enterprise. I know Mr. Hayes looking at pulling up the exact amounts right now, but it was significant to offset the deficits that we had during the pandemic.
Yeah, and that's where we're really paying. That was the question I was trying to get at. It's not that the enterprise is a losing proposition. It's just that we went through a lot going through the pandemic that really depleted our reserves.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so in that case, sense, very quickly, do we have confidence that we can, over time, build up this reserve with understanding that there will be a greater demand because of less parking being built within the core, and the fact that in the past it was in positive cash flow?
Well, I think history demonstrates that there is real opportunity with the parking enterprise in terms of getting to a cash positive situation in the future. Unfortunately, we're still in that transition phase post-pandemic, and so once we get a greater understanding of what office looks like in the downtown and what future residential looks like, we'll have a better sense of what that 10-year window would look like. But I would suggest that we'll be in tough times for another 2 to 3 years yet.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Chair, my apologies if my question lacked some discipline, but I've always been questioned on my discipline in the past. So
no problems here. Councillor Johnson, I remembered you this time.
Thank you, Chair Davey. You're doing a great job. And if I can just remind people to speak directly into the mic when they're at that central mic there. No, you're fine. Our mic, or the mics around the horseshoe are good. It's that central mic. I did actually have a question as well, and that is. Though I'm getting very good at lip reading, but I was wondering, Mr. Reedman, if I was wondering about the parking revenue as well, and I was surprised to see where it's at. Not that I'm encouraging this, but I'm wondering, do we have, and this is something that Councillor Michaud and I have talked about before, do we have enough bylaw officers? Are we getting the revenue from parking that we should be getting from parking? Maybe it's not Mr. Reedman. I'm sorry if I asked the wrong
sorry,
person.
Councillor Johnson. It's. I think the seat that I'm in is probably the worst for understanding. But are you speaking with respect to parking bylaw? We're talking about the parking enterprise, like the our parking garages.
I was thinking that money went into this as well. Am I incorrect?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
I was thinking that the revenue that we would collect from that would also go into this. Am I incorrect?
I'll let Mr. Reedman answer.
The revenue that we collected from tickets would go into this.
Yeah, Mr.
No?
Yeah, through the chair, no, that revenue from bylaw does not go to the parking enterprise. The parking enterprise only collects revenue on usage in essentially the downtown lots that are paid. So I do also have an answer on the Safe Restart funding, if I could just quickly. So it was $5.56 million over the pandemic that was put into the parking enterprise to offset the losses from COVID.
Yikes, okay. Thank you. Looks like Councillor Johnson has queued off. Okay, Councillor Schneider.
Oh, sorry, accident.
Accident? Okay, no further questions. Let's, actually, you know what? Let's take a 5-minute stretch break, guys, before we deal with the whip, okay? So, yeah, 5 after 2. We're making it easier over here. Okay, let's continue. We are now on the WIP rates and resources. Mr. Hadley.
Sure. So just a couple of introductory comments. Essentially, what you see in the budget is what you've already seen, what you've already discussed through WIP 2.0. The rate increase is 6.3%. There are some FTEs to help deliver the services and service levels that council was discussing, was reviewing. So there's essentially no new information. It may be packaged a little bit differently for budget purposes as opposed to what you saw before, but that's it. And there is an issue paper in Appendix F, Oppo 6, that has a bit of summary information, nearly not as thorough as the WIP 2.0 report and presentation, but just a reminder to council.
Okay, as said, we have already seen all of this and discussed it, but if there are any questions, I'll take them now. And I'm not seeing any, Mr. Hagee.
Oh, sorry. I guess natural gas, I went past it. But there is the gas utility at the very end. If there are any questions or comments about that.
Are there any questions on the gas utility? And I'm not seeing any of that either.
So there's no further staff presentation or information today. I don't know, Mr. Chair, if there's anything you want to regroup on. I guess we have capital coming next Monday. There can be some time to come at the strategic investment options, like to rediscuss. People have talked about what they like, what they might want to see. It can be another opportunity, and essentially that would be the final public meeting before the proposed budget comes forward on December 4th. And again, I guess to be clear, there's the $2 million of options. None of that is built in. There's $1 million of funding that's set aside for it, and whatever ends up being in the proposed budget is what would be discussed come final budget day on December 14th.
Thank you, Mr. Hagee. So now is the point where we would ask, and again, we'll still have more meetings to cover anything that gets missed, but if there's anything that was missed as part of operating, now would be opportunity to speak. Councillor Singh.
No, I don't have anything. I think it's all been addressed fairly well. There'll be opportunities, I guess, for us to bring motions forward at a later time. But may I make just a closing comment on the operating day? Yeah, just very quickly want to thank staff for where we're starting off at, and I know that's done with a lot of prudence to ensure that the rate of increase is, in line with sustainability of our citizens, especially as they're dealing with higher spending pressures from everywhere else. But that certainly will not be the case when it comes to our tax bill. And sadly, what they will be paying at the end of the year may not necessarily reflect what the City of Kitchener is charging. And I think we have to get that information across to them far better, showing what other orders of government, region, and the school board are charging in relation to us, because there is a significant contrast. And I think just what we discuss here around this room doesn't always necessarily get translated and filtered through to them. And they, at the end of the day, after a hard day's work, open up their mail and see that increase, and it's hard to bear. So whatever way we can do to show exactly the great work that we're doing. And a quick reply to, the reference that you made, Mr. Chair. And before I say that, I'll say thank you to your hard work in the past budgets and this one as well, as we're dealing with a very convoluted or different approach to passing this budget. You chair these meetings probably better than anyone around this council can, and you continue to do a great work in keeping us in line to make sure that there is a sense of collaboration, and we try to figure out consensus amongst the varying choices. But the fact that you said discipline, and I think you're reminding us prudence to show discipline. And I don't take offense to that. And I think that's important and necessary as you chair to remind us the importance of doing so. But we are where we are because of the discipline. If you look at all the communities outside City of Kitchener in this region, or even further across the province, they're dealing with really dire, stressful times in dealing with their budget. We're dealing with something that we are improving services, and we're keeping the tax rate below the rate of inflation within our commitment, even though in many cases within our departments, they're dealing with cost pressures that are well above the 3.9. You know, I've argued this in the past where it doesn't matter to the constituent about the MPI or CPI, but the fact is true. The cost to the city is MPI, which is far higher than the CPI, and we're still keeping the rate. That's because of discipline. That's because of discipline that this council has worked with staff, and in some cases we disagreed, and that's okay. You know, this is not a testament presented by staff and we have to believe it as it's written. No, I think you guys give us a roadmap within the direction that we need to proceed, and they may be slight detours. And there's nothing wrong with that for us to advocate on the things that are important to us to achieve what we want to do for our communities. And I think that can be done within the 3.9 budget. And I think that can be done within some of the flexibility that can be found. That is not a rebuke, objection to what staff have put forward, and they may not be in contrast to what the mayor ultimately will decide on this budget. I think we just want to do good by our community and find that right balance, and I think that will be my commitment for this budget as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Singh. Appreciate it. Councillor Ioannidis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Davey, and I echo many of the comments that Councillor Singh had mentioned, but I really want to hit home with regards to the messaging that we're going to send to the community, and I know Councillor Singh touched upon it, because I know when it gets to the regional budget, we're going to get hammered, and all the good work that we do just seems to seem not to be recognized, and we seem to take I guess the criticism towards the regional budget. And so if we can hammer home some of these slides that are just eloquently, you know, that can compare ourselves to the other municipalities, whether or not that's, you know, whatever, a digital campaign or whatever, because I think it really tells the real story of, you know, how frugal we've been, and in addition, it also shows how innovative we've been and collaborative among ourselves, among this council and staff, to even to be able to increase our services and still have everything low. And I don't know why, but that story just doesn't seem to be getting out there. And I know it's no lack of work from our team here, but I think we should be spending a lot more attention to this, and just be cognizant, because I know we're going to get hammered in whenever the region gets their budget through, and we get the influx of emails and what are we doing and everything else. And we've consistently given out such great budgets and value to our residents, and it just doesn't seem to resonate.
Thank you, Councillor Ioannidis. I'm going to go to Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Chair Davey. And thank you, Councillor Ioannidis and Councillor Singh, for your comments with regards to the great job that our staff are doing on this budget. I feel exactly the same way, and I feel like we're often caught a little bit between a rock and a hard spot here, in terms of the fact that when taxes are collected, it says City of Kitchener, even though we are collecting on behalf of all three levels of government. I'm wondering if someone from the finance team, perhaps it's Mr. Lautenbach, if you could, I had asked you this the other day, but I'm wondering if you can say it in our public session, but you know, when we collect the region's taxes and the school board's taxes, do we make revenue from that? Like, is it worth the amount of money that we collect from doing that for sometimes the PR piece that we have to wear? I'm wondering if you can maybe comment on that.
Mr. Lautenbach.
So through the chair, I think to respond to the question, we're required to bill property taxes on behalf of the region based on legislation. So we don't have a choice not to bill. That is, our requirement in terms of both the upper tier and the lower tier in the regional government, that we operate in. What I can say is we have put more efforts in even last year. We did have an insert in the bill that tried to highlight kind of that split between how the property tax bill is broken out. Certainly we can look at that again in terms of how we message that to residents this year. We are still planning to have an insert this year, and we'll circle back on what that looks like. And then certainly can take away the comments we've heard today in terms of how we can continue to try to tell that story in terms of our budget throughout the year, so that residents know, the value that they are getting for the city services that are offered by the City of Kitchener.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Mr. Lautenbach. Maybe it's something that on our bills, like it's a little tagline at the bottom. By the way, the city accounts for this amount of the budget, the region, and the school board. Maybe it's just not only on that insert, which people may or may not see. I get all of my bills online, so I don't see those. But maybe it's something that's on our website when you're looking up any of those things. It's readily available there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Rabinovich?
Thank you very much, and I too just want to thank staff again for all the work that's helped get us to this point. We'll obviously have the opportunity to consider the capital budget next week. I do hear the comments and the concerns around the regional budget, and I think as my colleagues are aware, I've certainly shared and echoed those concerns around the regional table in terms of the budget that's being presented to us over a series of days there, and will continue to do so up until the final approvals. I think it. While I do have some serious concerns in some areas, I think it's also important to note that the region does have a different basket of goods that they're responsible for and dealing with, which do create some pressures on them, which we don't necessarily feel here. And so while I think some aspects of the budget can and should be different, I think we also need to acknowledge that those pressures exist and impact our community as well. I will also note that, as has been identified through the regional budget process, there are a number of items that, quite frankly, both locally and other municipalities across Ontario and across Canada have been identifying as needing additional funding from the provincial and or federal governments in order to tackle those issues. And in the meantime, the decision has been made to support those individuals through regional tax dollars, which I do believe is the right thing to do, but that creates pressure points that I think we all also need to acknowledge. But I am proud of the fact that we have, because of the discipline of this and previous councils, been able to see the kind of trend line that was shown earlier today, and I'm confident we're going to be able to present a budget that's both reflective of the needs, but also the fiscal realities of our growing community when it ultimately comes forward on December the 14th.
Thank you. Councillor Andis, follow-up?
Yeah, thank you. Further to Mr. Lautenbach's comments, I'm just wondering whether we could maybe print new envelopes that have this right on the envelope and just have those all year round being delivered every month, showing that thing right on the envelope. And then two, for those that are online, when they click on their bill, it should come out like they do in every other business, come out, whatever it is, here's your bill and whatever it is, and then you click off to get your bill. So I think there are some ways that we can showcase how well we're doing here.
Yeah, thank you. I support that. And to the mayor's point as well, like the region definitely has different challenges, certainly than we do, but our interest, in the interest of transparency, is to make sure when people have questions about those tax increases that they're directed to the right body of government. So I would definitely support that. Just before, I know we're going to have a couple more budget meetings, but again, I want to thank staff. You really do make this job a lot easier with the discipline you've shown in this budget and well, looking backwards as far as I can remember. It's very much appreciated. And just a reminder to members of committee in terms of process, because I want to be really clear on this. So the final day for any amendments is December 11th. So the mayor will present his budget on December 4th. He will review that. Anything in there that you disagree with or would like to change, you have to have those amendments into the clerk by the 11th. And what that means is on the final budget day on December, well, technically the final budget day, I guess, on December 14th, that will be the time that we vote on those. But if you bring something new, and I want to be upfront on this, you bring something new that isn't related to one of those amendments, that will have to be ruled out of order at that time, because they were supposed to be in on that December 11th date, okay? Anyway, that concludes my comments, and I believe, can we go right into special counsel then, Mr. Mayor? Yeah, okay, so motion to adjourn? We are taking a motion. Councillor Singh goes in favor, and opposed. We are adjourned.